Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Income Tax Manager. No more tax headaches at the end of the year. I'm going to show you how to create this incredible tax manager, unlimited document type uploads, an automated tax summary complete with zip and email function, zipping all of your tax documents up in a single one click. It's going to be an incredible training. We're going to do it from scratch every step of the way. I cannot wait, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I've got a really great training this week. Taxes are always a headache. I don't know about you, but for me, they are. Getting all the documents together, all the forms, the records, filling everything out, putting all those receipts in a single place. This application is going to make it a lot easier. Not only that, I'm going to show you how to make it. We're going to be able to upload any document type. We're going to be able to save it, categorize it, automatically create their own organized folders on a per year basis. So everything's going to be organized automatically by VBA. And then of course, we're going to wrap it all up in just a single summary where you can get a report and of course, zip and email that summary in just a single click to your account. So we've got a lot to show you today. I want to get right to it. I create these trainings for you each and every Tuesday, absolutely free. If you want this application, of course, that is free too. All you need to do is click the links down in the description and you can get that either with your email or with your Facebook Messenger. We're going to get that sent over to you right away. As mentioned, it is free. However, if you do like to support us and support this channel, there are so many great ways to do that. One is you can join us on Patreon, because that way it gives you the opportunity on that platform to get whatever feature you want added to this application. Maybe you want me to fix something up, or maybe you want me to focus on a section. We do that inside Patreon with a whole lot more, along with free PDF code books. We have tons more when you sign up, including brand new lessons way before everybody else does, days before everybody else does. Plus, you'll get exclusive deals. You're going to get tons more, including that. So Patreon's a great platform for you to join us on. I hope you'll join us there, because that's where there's a lot going on. And of course, I'm answering questions and comments there as well. All right, so let's get started on this training. This is a sample. We're going to be putting this away and we're going to be starting from scratch. So you got an idea of what we're going to be building. All right, so let me move this aside here, and we're going to start on this blank sheet here. This is our income tax, so this is what we're going to be creating from scratch. Before we do that, just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be creating. We've got an admin screen. Admin screen can allow us to do a few things. One, we've got a folder. If we're going to be saving those documents in a specific folder and categorizing them, we've got to know what folder to save them in. So we're going to create an exclusive folder called documents, right? And it is this folder that we're going to browse for inside this. So we'll browse for that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put that folder right here. We also want to know what kind of form types are we creating. We want to categorize our forms, our documents, or our record into particular categories. It's going to make it a lot easier. So we have our income form types, and I've got a list of different income form types. Of course, this is generally for US, but you can change it for any country. And then just a little description to remind you what it is for. We've also got expense types. This is going to help us determine that profit and loss for year, or your taxable income for the year, if we have expense types. And of course, we have other form types that don't have anything to do with the income or the expense or write-offs. And then we have a list of tax years. So our admin's relatively simple, and then all we have is a database, and that's going to track everything else. We've got a document ID, a tax year, the transaction type that we just went over in the admin, the document form type, a path, right? Where is that document located? What is the name of it? Who issued the document, the amount, the notes, and the row. We're also going to use some data mapping here to help us with that. So let's go ahead and build out this screen first. And then what we'll do is we'll get into the code, and I'll walk you through every single step. So if you're new to coding, this will be a great training for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this down so we can see both the tabs and the commands here. And of course, I'm going to be using the newest Excel for this one, as we'll be doing moving forward for the most part. But I'll make sure to use any features that can be used with any version of Excel. So I'm going to color those first two columns in gray. Those are going to be for our admin. And then what I'll do is I'll give it that top row just all the way up until, let's go all the way across here, just to a nice, I think to AZ should be sufficient. Now in this, what I want to do is I want to give this a color. So I'm going to format that cells. And what we'll do is we'll give it a little, that green that you saw, that green fill, but I'll do a fill effects, and we'll do using two colors. So I'm going to use the green. As you saw, it's going to be green theme. So I'm going to go with this mid green to this lighter green. And then that's what we're going to use for our top header. And then the secondary line here, what we'll do is I'll go again all the way to, let's just say AZ one more time, and then a little bit of more of a fade effect. So sorry, it's off the screen, formatting those cells once again, using the fill effects, and then this time we're going to use that lighter to green, and we're going to create our background color, which is that light green. So we're going to blend into that. And then what we'll do is we'll just temporarily, we'll color everything, and then on down, all the way down here, to probably, let's just go with AZ one more time. And down here, okay, so we've got enough rows that we're going to be covering. That's going to be sufficient. And I'll just give it that background green color. Okay, so we're sufficient. We've got our background color here. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a tax year here, and I'd like to have a title. So let's insert that title as you saw. So what we'll do is we'll insert, right? And we want to insert a shape. So we're going to put inside this shape here, probably a type of text box, so that's all we need. And we'll call it illustrations, and then we just need a simple shape for text box here. And then that's going to be our title. We're going to call this, as you saw, Income Tax Manager. And then we'll format that a little bit. So we don't want to fill and we don't want a border on this. So we'll remove the fill. We have no fill on that here. And then we want no outline on that. So no border on that. And then what we'll do is we'll give it a larger font, probably something around 30 pixels, and then we want to change the font to something which is standard. I often like Arial Rounded Bold MT. Okay, I like that. Let's give it a little bit of the dark green color for theme, and maybe we'll just do a little bit of a shadow on that so it gives a nice effect on that. So that's sufficient, but that's too much. So I'm going to go into the shadow options, and what I'm going to choose is going to start out with this preset, and then we'll just drop it down a little bit less than that, so it doesn't give it that, just a little bit less. So that's kind of a nice look. Okay, that is sufficient right there, and what I'm going to do is just center that, and then we'll add an icon at the bottom. I'll add all my icons at the same time. So what I'd like to have is a year column, as you saw in the sample. If you didn't, no problem. And then I want to have a documents column. So our year column probably going to start out, we'll call it a tax year. That's going to be in 3 and 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and I'm going to merge and center that. And then I'm going to give that also a fill format. Sorry, it's off the screen. Formatting those cells. And then again, I wanted to use the same fill formats here. Again, using that dark green all the way to the lightest green. Okay, that's going to be because we've got 2 different rows that we're going to compensate it for. And we're going to call this tax year. So this is going to be our tax year. And then, of course, I want to wrap that text around. I want to give it a bold and then give it our dark green color so it's according to our theme. And then I'll just wrap the borders around that. So we're going to format. Of course, we can format in different ways. The border color we're going to use again. We'll use that dark theme all the way around, giving it around. So that's going to be our tax year there in 3 and 4. And what I also want to do is let's increase this row here so we have enough, and then bring this up here. So we've got enough for both our button sets, which are going to be below this, and then our row 2. So that's going to be sufficient for that. And then what I want to do is I also want to create some documents here. So I'm going to do documents. And then here I want the name of the document, and then I want the type of the document here. And that's going to be sufficient. That's going to go into G. Okay, so we've got the name and the type of document. We're going to center everything. And then I want to put borders around here. So I'm going to merge and center this here. And then what we'll do is we'll use the borders around everything. That same green consistent border. And of course, we can color that border here. Right? We can give it a specific line color. Let's zoom up on that so we can scroll up on that. So we can give it that border, that green, that line color. We'll go with that standard green that we're going with. And I just want to color basically all these borders around here. That's going to be sufficient. And then, of course, we're going to go inside. We want the inside borders here. So all the borders will color. All right, I like that there. Now what we'll do is we'll format these cells, and I want to give it that little bit darker green color. So I'm going to do the fill effects here and give it that darker green look that we had there. The little fade there between these 2 colors there. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing on the lower one, but just a little bit lighter here. Gives us that nice look. That's going to give us the same look as that merge cell on the left side, which we want to be consistent with the colors as we build this application so that it gives a nice theme and a nice color so it's appealing. So what I'd like to do is here, have all the tax years here, have all the documents here, and then as I click the document, I want those documents to appear here. So down here, the row, here's where I want to skip, right? Have a spacer there. And what I want to put is a tax year here, the tax year here. And then that tax year is going to be here. We've got some data validation here. So then next up, what I want to do is I want to skip something, and I want to have a transaction type, that transaction What is the type of that transaction? Is it income, is it expense, or is it other? So I want to put that here, and then that actual transaction type is going to go directly inside N4 here. So we're going to give it those two, just to give it that white color so we can keep track. And this is going to be a merged center, and then we'll move it to the right. All right, so that's what we're going to have as far as our first row. Then what we want to have, skipping one row, I want to have the form. So put in a form, or maybe the document, or the record type, or it could be different type, record type. That's that named range that we saw here. So inside that, I want to put the form type here, whether it's receipt, is it an other form type, or is it an income, right? So it's either going to be an income form type, like here, an expense form type down here, or perhaps it's going to be an other. So I've got 3 different named ranges, and it's going to be based on the form type that's selected here, and that is going to go here. So we're going to use that on M and N6. So I'm going to merge the center of that, left justify it, color that white. Okay, and then we'll get the formatting. I'm going to skip another row. So inside 8, I want to have the document path. What is the actual path of that document? That's very important. We're going to need to browse for that. So document path, that's going to be a longer one. So we'll put a button here inside N. So I'm going to color all of this white. I want that entire path all the way from, let's say, J through M will cover that for us. So merge and center, left justify, and color that white, just so we can keep track of it. Skipping a row again, I want the name of the document name here, and I want that covered. That's going to be all the way from K all the way through N, because that's going to be larger. That's going to be larger. So we want to contain it. We want to make sure that we're having enough room for our preview document here. So merge and center that here, and then left justify. That's going to be our document name. And again, we're going to do the same thing here. Merge and center that, and then right justify. We'll do the borders after everything. After that, what do I want? I want to know who's going to issue that. Is there a vendor name, or who issued it? Vendor or issuer. We'll do issuer. Okay, so who issued that? And then also I want to have the amount. I want to know what amount is that. That's very important. Obviously, we need to know the amount. So those are 2 things that we need to cover. Let's merge and center this, left justify it. And then what we'll do is I'll left justify this and color those white. Okay, so we've got those. Next up, all we have really left is some notes. So I'm going to do notes here and give the user the ability to add in notes, and we'll cover a lot of rows on that. So maybe we'll go from 14 through 19 on that. So let's go ahead and do something like that. And then what we'll merge and center this, left and upper, and then color that white. Okay, I like the way that that looks. That's going to our form. And I also want to put a border around there. So let's add some borders here. I'm holding down the control, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these that we just created. We'll have to do some additional merging and centering and things like that, especially for some labels, but we're almost finished with our on-sheet form. And now I'm going to format those. Sorry, it's off the screen there. Right-click, Format Cells, Border. Going to go with that same dark green border that we've been using consistently. I'm going to give it a solid outside, and then inside I'm going to do this dash line. And then this one we do have to fix right here. So I'm going to merge and center that here, right justify that, and then make sure we've got the border all the way around it here, formatting those cells, and then putting that round border all the way on the, let's say, the top left and the bottom. That's solid border. Okay, good. So I like the way that looks. So we've got tax year. We'll have a drop down list of all the years. We have transaction types. I'll put income, expense, or other in that. We'll have a data validation drop down list based on whether it's an income expense here. The document path, I'll put a browse button right here. The document name will default that to whatever was used here. Of course, the user can change that. The vendor issuer, they can put whatever they want in here. And then the amount. Okay, very good. So let's put in some borders around here just as we did everywhere else. And then we're going to be good to go with the borders on that. And what I'll do is I'll put in probably another border just to encapsulate everything. I'm going to insert a shape on that. I'll do, they call them insulation. Here, of course, illustrations, let's pronounce that properly. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it down here. So I want to, and then we don't need very many borders on that, just keep it there. No fill on that. Obviously we don't want to fill. We're going to do a shape outline using consistent, and let's take a look at that. Okay, that looks kind of nice. And I like the way that that looks. What I'll do is I'm going to drop this down here. This is where our button, this space here is where our button set's going to go. Bringing this up, we don't need that. We'll put an icon up here. We'll merge and center everything. And it's looking really good. So what I want to do is I want to have tax years here. Let's say 2018, 2019. And then, so continuing down. And I want to have some documents here. So we'll put document. And I want to have some conditional formatting here. So we need to add in that conditional formatting. I want alternating rows conditional formatting. So it's going to be based on whether there's a value in there or not, of course. So I'm going to go all the way down here, and I'm going to add some conditional formatting, okay? But I want alternate rows. So we can do that using some different conditional formatting. So I'm going to add a new one in, and then I'm going to base it on two conditions. So we're going to use a formula. It's going to be based on two different conditions. So equals and then the first condition is I want to know to make sure that there contains a value in D and any row that's associated. Get rid of the absolute $sign. We'll just contain D5 for any type of row. Does not equal empty. That's going to be our first condition. The next condition is going to be based on whether it's an odd or even row. And we can use the mod function for that. And this is going to be for even rows. So on even rows, what I want to do is I want to put in that's going to be a lighter color, and I also want to put in some borders. So I'm going to format that, and I'm going to do a fill, but I want something a little bit lighter than that. I was using a previous color here, so let's find it. I'm going to use this lighter green color here. Now, if you want to use a previous color, use the two colors, even though we're using the same color in both. Let's make sure it's the same color in both the top and the bottom, right? So that's how we get that same color. I'm going to go with the lighter color, although it's almost exactly the same. So we got the same color, this light green. That's what I want to show for the even rows that have the value. And I'll put a little bit of a border around it too. So I'm going to do format and border, and we'll do a very, very light border, not just something like this, a little bit lighter than, and we'll go all the way around the outline. So that's going to cover it. What I want to do is I'm going to copy this formula, Control C, click OK, and I'm going to add one more new rule. So I'm going to add a new rule, and then we're going to go into the formulas. We can manage the formulas. Now I want it for odd rows, so I'm going to put in a 1 here. Now the odd rows, what we can do is we can keep the background color the same, but I want to have a similar border. So I'm going to use a border here, this color, and just wrap the border around it and click OK. So this is going to be for odd rows. All we're going to do is going to have a border and click OK. And then apply that. Okay, so that's the way I like to look. It's got a nice look in here, but you'll notice that this border disappeared. This bottom border disappeared, and this one's going to disappear too when we add it. So how do we avoid that? Well, what I want to do is you can use conditional formatting to add a border there. So we can do so it's very simple. We can just add a top border on this one. So we'll add a new rule, right? And it's only based on the row. So it's going to be equals row equals, and it's 5. That means only for this row, right? Only for row 5. And what do I want to do? I'm going to replace that top border that got disappeared when we added the conditional formatting. All I'm going to do is adding a top border for only that row. And of course, we only need to apply to that row. And now it's there. Okay, I like that there. It looks really good. And now we'll do the same thing. So what I want to do is I want to do the same thing for documents, but it's going to be slightly different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste special. I'm going to paste those formats in there. Then now we've got the conditional formatting here, but we need to make some changes. So I'm going to manage the rules that are currently there because we just pasted them in. This one, we do need this one here. That's going to help us there. And also, we can also move it to the top, make sure it's on the top. And then what we want to do is obviously this doesn't apply to F5. This one is going to apply to both F5 and G5. So I'm going to make sure it's both of those because I want that top border. This one here is going to be based on F5 if there's a value. So we're going to edit that basing on F, right? Because it's for documents, F. So we're going to change that. And then this is going to apply to what? Well, it's going to apply to F and G and all the way down. Let's say to 99 or 99 or whatever you want to do, okay? And then I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to make sure that applies to is also here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to change this to F. Okay, there we go. So now we've got the same conditional formatting applying to different. So clicking apply. And now we can see as we add information here, you can see it's going to automatically apply. So very good. All right, I like that. That's looking good. We have our conditional formatting that's applied already as we add years. So what we'll do is we're going to run an advanced filter, right? I want to know all the unique years based on this. Those unique years are going to come here through a macro. And I'm going to bring those unique years, I'm going to bring them into our income tax and paste them right here as we refresh. The documents, if we select a year, I want all the documents associated with that year to display there automatically. Okay, I'm going to bold that. I'm going to bold this one too, so it's look. Okay, good. So we've got a nice little, and now what we want to do is we want to add some buttons. So I'm going to insert, again, illustration, shapes. I'm going to use this square button here, and I'm going to add just a shape here. Create a nice button, and then we'll go ahead and duplicate it once we're happy with the look, giving it a fill of our, let's go with a little bit lighter green on here. We don't need an outline on here, so we'll go to no outline. And I want to do, let's call this save document. Very good. I'm going to right click it here and I want to go into the format, the shape here, because what I want to do is I want to format the properties. The first thing what I want to do is go into the text options and I want to do the text outline here. I want to make sure that there's obviously no outline and no text field. The solid fill is fine for our text. Actually, the text box here, I want to make sure that there's no margins here, or maybe a slight one on the right margin, 0.05. That's sufficient. We don't need any left, top, or bottom. Okay, that's good. I like that. That's good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right justify that, because we want that icon on the left and we want to put it in the middle. Right? Once we have it the way we want it, then we'll go ahead and add the icons. But what we want to do is we want to add all the buttons first, then the icons on top of that. So save document, that looks pretty good. I like the way that that looks. I'm going to place that right up here on the left, and I'm going to duplicate that using Control D. The next button that I want to have after that is I want to have new document. So we're going to call this new document. And then after that, I want to be able to delete the document. So again, I'm going to duplicate that using Control D. And this one's going to be called delete document. All right, very good. We'll make this one a little bit bigger so we can get some room for some icons. Making sure I'm going to hold down that they're all the same heights. Going to the shape format and making sure that they all have the 0.26 height. That's sufficient. Perfect. Great. But I want other buttons too. So let's close this out. What else do I want? I want to obviously be able to view the tax history. So I'm going to Control D and I want another one called view tax history, view tax, and then we'll call it tax summary, right? Because I want to be able to view that tax summary. When we do that, everything else is going to be hidden and that tax summary is going to be displayed. So I'm going to maximize this a little bit here, and then we're going to place that directly over here. So we want to be able to view. I want that document preview to show up here. We're leaving that space for that document preview. Inside that tax summary, we want to have some additional buttons. And so what are those buttons? Well, the first one's going to be hide tax summary. So I'm going to Control D. I want to hide the tax summary. So we'll do hide the tax summary. Hide, we'll just call it hide summary. And that way they're going to give it the user the ability to show or hide. We'll make that a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to duplicate that. And I want to also be able to print the summary. So print summary. Good. And then the last thing, of course, we need to be able to zip and email that summary. So not only the summary, but all the documents as well. So zip and email. I like that. That's looking pretty good. We've got all of our button sets except for the browse button. So we're going to need that. So I'm going to duplicate that one more time here and place a browse button. And I'm going to place that. This one I'll make a little bit smaller. I'm going to place that right here. But of course, we need that a little bit smaller so it's consistent with that. So I'm going to change the height on that to about 0.22. So I like that. We'll call this browse so that we can actually browse for that document that we're going to load. So browse. Okay, and then we'll change the width to that about 0.7. Making sure that we have room for the icon, enough room for the icon. That looks good. Okay, so we've got all of our button sets, and let's move these up here, zip and email, and then print summary, and then we also have the hide summary. So we got print summary, zip and email. All of these, of course, are going to go, and I'm going to bring these. Let's go ahead and add those icons now. We'll put these here for now, and then what we'll do is we'll group them so that we can easily hide and show them accordingly. Okay, so we're good to go, saving our work. Now we're ready to insert our icons associated with this application. We always want to do the buttons first, and then so we're ready to go. Okay, so we're going to insert the pictures on that. We can do that through here, pictures, and then of course this device. Now I've got some saved pictures up, and we're going to put those directly inside here. So let's pull them up here. I've got them right up inside this folder. What I'm doing is I'm just going to select all the icons we have. I don't think we're going to need this envelope one here. And then what we'll do, we'll put them all in and then insert those. Okay, good. And now I'm going to size them accordingly. Let's say 0.18, making them a little bit smaller here. And then we'll position them accordingly around the application. So the first thing is we've got our screen icon here, so we can make that a lot bigger. So that's going to be for our application logo there for taxes. Then what I have is this is going to be for our new document here. This one's going to be for our saving or updating it. That'll be sufficient. For deleting it, of course, we've got a few options. We can use the X or we can use the trash can. Let's go with the trash can here. And then what we want to be able to view the tax summary. That's important. So I've got an icon here, right here for viewing our tax summary. We've got to be able to hide that summary. So we're going to use a triangle for that. And then also what I want to do is I want to have the zip and email. We're going to use, for this one, we're going to use zip and email. The printer, of course, I need that printer too. That's going to be not a printer there. Folder icon is going to go here, putting that folder right there. And then let's say I need print and hide summary. Let's add those now. All right, let's browse for those additional 2 icons. I've got some more that I want to add, inserting the pictures, and we'll put those 2 hide and summary. So it's going to be this printer here, and then I want the left arrow here. That's the 2 additional, setting those to 0.18. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to just add those in here. I want the hide summary to go right in here, and I want the print summary to go right in here. Okay, good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my selection tool and make sure that they're all horizontally, vertically aligned. There we go. So now I'm ready to group these, right? So I'm going to group them individually first and then as a group together because I want that summary group separate, right? So I'm going to group this here and I'm going to group these. These 3 buttons here are going to be their own group, right? Only to be used for our summary group. And we're going to give this a name. We're going to call this tax summary group. So this group, these 3 groups of buttons here, grouping those here, and then I want to give those a group here. Call this tax sum group. And I also want to do it with the other buttons. So not only the other buttons, but this shape as well. So this one here, I've grouped these here all the way already, just grouping those together. Now I'm going to give it a group. So I want to group that, and we're going to give that a specific name. The name that I'm going to call that is called document group because it's exclusive for just those documents. So I'm going to add here document group here. Okay, so the next important thing to do is holding down the control. I want both of those groups. I want to set the properties on both of those groups to move but don't size. So we're going to go down to properties and move but don't size with the cells. So we're setting that up. This group I want to show only with our tax summary. So I'm going to take it over here and I only want to show it around right around here about AA through AE, this summary. So our summary is going to end up right here. Okay, here's our summary. So this is a merge and center cell here. I want to put that summary in right here. That summary here is going to be called tax summary. So I've got it already merged and centered just a little bit quicker there. So we're going to give this a name called tax summary, but I'm going to put it inside a formula because I want that year to be dynamic. So I'm going to put in tax, call this tax summary for year ending. And then I'm going to put a space, and then we're going to put the year, but not yet. That year is going to take on a formula. So we'll be adding that year in. This area, this merge and centered cell here, this is where our graph will be going. Then what I want to do is I want to put in our income here. So I'm going to put in total reported income. Down here, I'm going to put total expenses and credits. So all the credits that you're going to go to remove from your gross income. And then I want total taxable income here. So that's what I want to show here. We're going to, of course, make these cells white here because I'll make them just a light green. That lighter green should be sufficient here because it's not a user entered field. I'm going to format those cells all the way around here. And then what we'll do is we'll use of course, our green consistency, and we'll do all the way inside and outside of the borders. And then put the dotted line in the middle there. I like the way that looks. I'm going to put a dotted line around here. So formatting those cells, and we'll keep this open so we can format those cells accordingly. All right, so I like that. And then for this area here, what I'd like to do is I like to have a border here, a larger border up here, but I also want to have the header names up here. What are those header names? So I'm going to put in transaction type. I want to know the transaction type. I also want to know the form or the document type. We'll put in doc type. And then next up, what I want to have is the document name. What is the name of that document? And then issuer, who issued it? Was it a vendor or issuer? Issuer. So put that, we could probably put in vendor or issuer because it could be either one. Whoever issued that, it could be a business, it could be your company that you work for. And then lastly, the amount. So we want to have the amount in there. Okay, let's format these based on our current theme. So we're going to format those. And then what I want to do is I want to add some fill effects there, just as we've been doing with our theme here, using the 2 color greens that we're going to have. So I'm going to go from the mid to the lightest there. That's sufficient there. And then I'll give it some internal borders here. So then I want to do a thick border. Let's do a thick border on the top. And then inside the left, middle, and right and the bottom we'll do them. I like that. And just around here we'll do the thick border because I want that going to be printed out. So I wanted to make sure it looks nice because that also is going to be printed out and zipped up so you can send that to your accountant. So I think that's kind of nice so that they get not only do they get all the documents, but they get the summary as well. Okay, looking good. And then here what I want to have is conditional formatting based on that. Now that conditional formatting is exactly the same as the conditional formatting we had it here and here. So all we need to do is copy and customize. So Control C. And then what we'll do is we'll paste special. Of course, you can paste the formatting here as well using that Now that we have those conditional formats pasted in there, we can go ahead and manage those rules. Then we can update them accordingly. So for this one, of course, it's not going to be row 5. We're going to change that to row 9. Row 9, we want to make sure that top order is consistent. So formatting those, and it's going to apply to the entire top row all the way from AA. So we're going to select AA9 all the way to AE9. Okay, so for the next one, right, we want mod row, but it's not, of course, it's going to be the columns got to be adjusted. 9 is correct, but it's not column D. We now need to update this to AA, so we'll change this to AA. And clicking OK, and then I want to change this as well. Also, instead of D, I want to change this to AA. And now all we need to do is update the applies to. So we'll select in one of them, again, putting down, and then all we need to do is update the last row. We'll go with a high row, say 999. That'll allow us at least for 1,000 or so. Okay, so we're good to go on that. Now I need to just copy this and paste it down here. Now we've applied those, and now all we need to do is just check to make sure. So we'll just add in some data here and to making sure that that looks good. That's the way I want it there, looking very nice. Okay, very good. Actually, let's gonna update this one. I like this one. I want to be a little bit lighter here. So I'm just gonna manage that. I'm gonna change this dark green. We've got a lighter green. I'm going to change this to white. I want to change something to just white. So let's go here and edit role, something a little bit lighter because I want to make sure that that data, I want to do a fill, and fill is white here. Let's take a look at that, see how that looks. And then we'll maybe change it. I'm going to change this one to lighter green because I want them, because it's going to be a report, I want to make sure that it's very easy to read. And so let's go into fill effects. I want to choose the lighter. We can choose it from here. That's kind of nice. Okay, I like that. That's good. We can do this 2 color here. Good. Okay, that looks nice. I like that. Clicking OK, and then apply. Okay, good. So I want to make sure that it's very light and easy to read. That looks really nice. Continuing on. So we've got our summary here, and we've got everything ready. We're almost ready for VBA, and that's going to help us add our data. We'll be adding in, of course, the data as we get it in here. So we've got some data validation here. Now, this transaction type is going to be more than one type, right? I've got really 3 different ones that could be. We have income, we have expenses, and we have other. So those are the 3 different transaction types that we're going to be working with. So let's go into here and add those 3 into the data validation. So here we're going to add a brand new data validation. So we'll go ahead and add it in here, clicking here, data validation, right? I want 3, I want a list place, and I want income, expenses, and other. Okay, so we'll do expense and other. The names are very important because it is those names that we're going to use inside name range. So income, expense, and other. Okay, now keep in mind, inside the named range, I've already created 3 different lists. So we're going to go into the formulas, the name manager, and we have here, we have income type, we have other type, and we have expense type. Now, each one of these are related to the list as using a dynamic named range using the offset. So we have form types. We have expenses that are going to cover all the expenses. We have income that's going to cover all the income. And of course, we have other that's going to cover all of the other here. So here we can see all the other. So it's going to be those 2 things right here. So what I want to do is I want to create a data validation. So as we change this to income, expense, or other, this data validation, this record change data validation list is based on whatever it is in here. So whether if we choose expense, it's going to be all of these. If we choose other, it's going to be all of these. And if we choose income, it's going to be all of these. Now we can do that using VBA. So we're going to get into that in just a moment. So as we make that change, I want this data validation to change. So we also, another thing that we need to do with VBA is we need to know which year, we need a unique list of years. Now we have some data with all the tax information here, but what I want is I want a unique list of years based on all the data. So we're going to extract that using, of course, advanced filter without criteria, and we're going to getting our unique list of years. And then it is that list of years that we're going to bring over inside our income and have it populate this area here. Great. So we've got that covered. We understand how we're going to build that. We're going to do that with VBA. There's a few things that we want to add inside this application, some formulas and some information as we create it, not too much. So what do I want? I also want to keep track of certain things on the admin. I want to know the selected year, and I also want to know the selected document. Right? So I want to know the rows of that. And I also want to know the document ID. Each document can have an individual ID. I also want to know what row that document is associated with, what database row. And then I want to know the next document ID. Okay, so we want to know all those information. Now these are selected, these are going to be based on conditional formatting. And what I mean is when I select it, I want conditional formatting to highlight that. So for example, if this is 6, I want conditional formatting to automatically show that. And if this is 6, I want it also to show. So these are row selected document. I'm going to add that. I'm going to add that row to that because I want to know what's row, selected document row, making sure that that's clear. Okay, expanding this so we can see that, and I'm going to left justify this. That is it. That's relatively all for the admin. It's relatively easy. And then I'll just give this a unique color so that we can highlight that it's for admin use. And of course, that column is going to be hidden. So we're going to use all the borders, right? Let's just do all the borders here. All right, so what do we have? I want to know the document ID and I want to know the document row. Now I have a named range for document IDs. If we look in our database, we see we have document IDs. If we go into the formula, I've already created a named range called document ID. If we look down here, we see that we have, using the offset, all the document IDs. Okay, so what do I want to have? I want to know the row that's associated. That means if document ID is displayed, I want to know it's on row 4. Therefore, if, let's go to the right sheet here, Randy, if document ID here is set at 1, I want this document row to show 4. So we're going to use equals if error. We're going to use the match formula. And what are we looking up? I'm looking up this document ID. And what am I using? I'm using the match, right, obviously. And then I'm going to use the lookup array. That's what I meant. The lookup array is going to be that document ID. I'm looking it up, and I want an exact match. So I'm going to use 0. But I want the row number. I don't want it to return 1. That row number, that first one, is going to be on row 4. So we need to add 3. If it's not found or there's an error, I just want it to show empty. Okay, so that means the document row for 1 is on row 4. Document 2 is on row 5. Perfect, that's exactly what I want. I also want to know the next available document ID. We can use the max formula to do that. We're going to wrap that on if error, because if there's no data at all, it's going to create an error. So we're going to use the max formula. And the document ID, I want the max of all the document IDs plus 1. I want to know that next available document ID. If there's no data, it will create an error. So I just want to set the default, if there's no data, to 1. That's the first available document ID. So we know that our next available one's 29. And then if we look inside our database and we go all the way down to the bottom, we see our last one's 28, and that means our next one's 29. That's exactly what we want. All right, let's bring this up here. We'll just show just the tabs for now. And so we've got all this information. That's all we need. Let's save our work. What I want to do is add just some conditional formatting here. I want that selected row to be highlighted in green. So as we add rows, I want to know. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go into the home and add 2 more conditional formatting. Manage those rules, and I want that rule to be on top. So I'm going to create a new rule here, and it's going to be based on the row of a certain cell. So equals row, and then it's going to be equal to what? That year is going to be based on here, selected row. If B2 is equal to selected row, I want to give it a unique format. I'm going to give it a fill effects here. I'm going to go with that light green, or the middle green to very dark green. And I also want to give it a font color. The font's going to be bold and white. All right, I like that. That looks good. And so that's going to be sufficient. Clicking OK and then apply it and making sure that that works good. That's exactly the way I want it. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for documents. So I'm going to edit that and just copy that, make it a little bit quicker, but not much quicker. Create a new rule, right? And then use a formula. And of course, this is going to be based on the row, and it's going to be based on B3. Okay. I'm going to use the same exact. So going to the format, the fill effects here, the repetition helps us remember these things. Again, using the same color, the same consistency here, clicking OK. Font's going to be bold and the font's going to be white. All right, so I like that. And of course, the applies to is going to have to change on that. So that applies to is going to be from our F5 through G. So let's tab over here and update that accordingly. And then we'll just go down a bunch of rows. We also need to go down the rows for this, 999. That's a lot. And this is 99 enough, sufficient. Okay, so we're going to apply that, and there we go. Okay, so now we see as this changes, right? So does our year. As this changes, go to 5, which is our first row, it changes the year. That row, when we make a selection change, that will change. I will put whatever row we've selected in here. I'll put whatever row we've selected in here. Very good. I like that. The rest will come through VBA, and that's exactly what we're going to get into right now. We are ready to go into VBA and do a few things. The first thing what I want to do is when we make a selection, I want to put that row here, and then we're going to create a macro for that. So let's do some of the on-sheet code. That means the code that happens on the sheet when we make a selection or when we make a change, we want some things to happen. So what is that? Well, we're going to do that inside VBA. We're going to go to the Developers tab to get into VBA. We're going to go into Visual Basic. There's a shortcut called Alt F11 that'll get you there. And we can hide this code. That's for our sample, right? We don't want a sample. I want to focus on our actual document that we're working on. So we have our income tax here. This is the sheet. We've got 3 different sheets here. The code names are admin, income tax, and tax document. We also have modules where we've created just a little bit, but I've got nothing inside these macros. We'll be writing them together, except for this one, which is kind of basic. And then, of course, we have document macros, which will handle the document. And we have our tax summary macros. We're going to be able to show, hide, refresh, and print, and zip an email, where I've just done some dimensions, some variables to make things a little bit quicker. But what I want to do is focus on that on-sheet code, right? Remember, we're going to focus on on-sheet. And so the first thing what we want to do on sit is we're going to make a selection change. So we're going to go into Worksheet and then selection change, right? Because we want to focus on making a selection change on those years, right? If I make a selection on anywhere from D5 on down and making sure that D contains a value, we want something to happen. So let's write that up right now. So it's based on a selection change, right? And if it's a specific range. So what is that range? Of course, it's going to be from D5 all the way through. Let's do D99. And we make a change. D99 is nothing. And of course, we need to make sure that there's a value in D, nothing. And, right, if not intersection means we're actually making a selection change to that range. Not and nothing cancel each other out. And range, we want to make sure that D contains a value. D and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty. Only then do we want to do something. And then what do we want to do? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure to add the word then. I want to make sure that range B2 takes on that target row. Value equals target dot row. Set the selected row or year. It's the year row. Okay, I want to make sure that we do that. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to load a macro. Obviously, we haven't written that macro in, but what is the name of that macro? That macro is going to be down here. I want to load some specific documents. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to we want to actually make sure that we run the macro to load those documents. When I select a year, I want all the documents to load for that year. So that's going to happen. Now, it is this macro right here that we have not written at. It's called documents list. So it's inside the documents list. And it's called load the document list. We also had to load the tax years. So it is this macro, nothing's in there, that we're going to be running. So we might as well write that in right now and just have it done. And so what this is going to do is going to run macro. Let's put the comment there. Run macro to load list of documents for selected year. So we only want documents for whatever year has been selected. Also want to make sure that we're going to actually add in something a little bit later on, which is going to be making sure, like if I select a year and that summary is, I want to change that summary. So better write it in now in case I forget. So here's what I'm going to show you. If what I want to know is here, right? At some point, well, we can get rid of that for now. If I'll comment that out for now. So what I'm going to do is if I want to know if they select a year and we have this summary, now either we're going to have two choices. Either we're going to be displaying this or we're going to be displaying this, but not both at the same time, right? So my idea, whoa, way too far. So my idea is here. If we have this summary visible, if this summary is visible, I want to refresh the summary, right? I want to know only those particular transactions for the given year, if this is visible, right? So how do we do that? So I'm going to format this. I'm going to put the border around this. I like that a little bit better all the way around. Okay, good. So what I want to do is I want to know, is column A visible or not? I just want to run a test. If the column is hidden, right, then I want to make sure that we're not, if it's not hidden. So let's add that in. So basically, when I select a year, I want to load the documents here. And I also, I may want to update this summary if it's visible. So we can do that with some code. So let's continue writing that code now until we know, then it'll kind of all come into play a little bit later on. But it's easier for us to write the code now and then have to come back. What I want to do is I just want to check to see if entire column dot hidden equals false, then what do I want to do? Then I want to refresh that schedule. I want to run the macro that's going to refresh that summary of all those documents. Then what do we want to do? Well, then I want to refresh it. Is this tax summary? We have a specific macro that's located. It's going to refresh it. This is the macro that we're going to write. So it is this macro that I want to refresh all of them. So I'm going to put that directly in here. Then, and here's the explanation. So refresh yearly summary if visible. Okay, we're just checking to make sure it's visible. And that's all we need to do. That's relatively simple. Okay, good. I really like that. That's good. That's all we have to do for that. Pretty simple. Now, what else do we have to do? While we're on selection change, right? This is only if we're selecting years, but we also want some things to happen if I select a document, right? If I select a year, so notice how that's changing now. You see how it's changing? Perfect. Now, what about if I select the document? If I select a document, I want that document to load. Right? I want to load whatever document, and I want that preview to show up here. Of course, we're going to need more space for that, right? So we're going to need space for that document, and that's fine. That's perfect. And so we're either going to show this section or we're going to show this section, but not both. We're going to use this button to hide it. We're going to use this button to show it. Okay, so that'll come into play in a little bit. So as we are on selection change, when I select a document, I want a few things to happen. One, I want the row that we selected, and I want that row to go directly inside B3. And then I want to run the macro that's going to load that document. So let's add that in right now. So let's update this so we're clear with the comments on selection of year. Okay, so we're good with that. Now what we also want to know on selection of a document. So let's write in a comment here. Commented on selection of document. And we can just pretty much copy and paste this and then update the row. So I'm going to copy this here and I'm going to update those columns, right? We're not focused on column. This time we're going to be focused on F through G, F through G. We want to make sure that F contains a value. So F through G, we need to make sure that F contains a value, but this is going to be F through G. And make sure we add the and if, right? So everything happens in between. And if that, what do we want to do? Well, that's going to be focused on selected row of the document. So I'm going to copy this, but that's going to be based on B3, right? B3 is going to take on that row. And that's selected document row, selected row for document, right? This is a specific document. When we select that, we want a few things to happen. The first thing is we want that target row so that we can automatically add that conditional formatting in. And then next up, we want to run the macro that's going to load that document, right? We haven't written that macro yet, but that document's going to be right here. And it's going to be called here document preview, right? We've got document preview and we have document load. So it is this document load here that I'm going to add in there. I want to load the selected document. And that's what's going to be here. So here we can do this, but I also want to do one more thing. I also want to add in whatever is in here. I'm going to put that document ID. I'm going to place that right in here. So the ID is going to be hidden. It's going to go in column E. Remember, every single document ID, when we run that, it's going to have an ID. We have a document name, right? And we have the form type. So we have all that information, but I want that document ID because it is that document ID I want to place directly in B4. So I'm going to place that directly in E, but you won't be able to see it. Well, you will as I'm doing this, but of course, when we release them, you can easily make them hidden a few different ways. So from E is going to take on, E will take our document IDs. When I load all those documents, when I run the macro to load, the document ID will go here in column E, the name and the type. Okay, so E will take on that. So whatever is in E, I'm going to place directly inside B4. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Range B4 dot value equals, where's it going to come from? It's going to come from range E and the target dot row dot value. That's going to be our document ID. Now, once we have that, I also want to run that macro document load. So this is going to be run macro to load document. Good, I like that. That's good. So we've got everything there. So now, of course, there's nothing here, but you see there's nothing, which is fine because once we put in actual data here, perfect. So that's it for the selection change event. So we've written all the macros for selection change, but I've got more. I want to know, now we're going to focus on a worksheet change event. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to put in change, and now we're going to write and click OK. So that's fine. Now we're going to focus on some changes based on the worksheet. That means when the user actually makes a change, right? So one thing we mentioned, when I make a change to here and for, I want something to happen, right? I want the data validation here. I want this to be either income list, expense list, or other list. So we've created 3 named ranges. So I want to create data validation based on that, but I only want to make sure the kind of changes, any kind of change, but making sure that it's not blank. So that's going to be a change based on N4. So that's what we're going to write right now, and it's going to be based on that. So changing, if not then, right? Let's add then. N4, right? N4. But I also want to make sure that N4 contains a value. So and range N4 dot value does not equal empty. Then I want to do something, right? We don't need two then, so that's just one and sufficient for our purposes or anytime. Okay, so then what do we want to do? Well, when it comes to data validation, the first thing we always want to do is delete any data validation that's in there. So M6, we're going to delete that data validation. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Range M6, because that's the cell we're putting it in, dot validation dot delete. Okay, delete any data validation. We can't add new or update anything unless we first delete the existing. Okay, so next up, we're also going to do data validation, but this time we're going to be adding data validation. And it's going to be based on what? Based on conditions. We're adding 3 different ones. What are we going to be adding? If we look in here, we're going to be adding to either 3 different types. Either we're adding income type, we're adding other type, or we're adding expense type. Now, notice the names are all very similar. Based on this value, all we have to do is add the word type based on this. So when I add it, it's going to be based on that. Don't worry about that. We're not done with that yet. We're not done with that yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to add it, right? Dot add. I need to add a validation type. And of course, what type we're going to be adding? We're going to be adding a list type, right? So let's go down here. It's going to be the list. And then what do we want to do? I want to make sure it's going to be alert style stop. So we'll do XL valid. We want to stop if it's incorrect. Alert stop, right? We want it to stop. Now, what are we going to add? We're going to add a formula onto that, right? So I'm going to go here, and what is that formula? We're skipping the operator, and we're going to add a formula. So it's going to be equals, and what else? And I want to add that named range. But what is that named range? That named range is based on whatever's in N4. Income type, expense type, or other type. So range N4 dot value equals that, right? Income, expense, and what else? And we need to add the word type at the end of it, type. Okay, good. I like that. Let's take a look at that. Now let's work it out, okay? Let's get rid of that equal. Don't need that in there. Okay, so, and the type. So we combine the name, income, expense, or other with type. This is going to be our complete named range with the equals. Okay, good. Let's take a look at that. And now, so when I change that, we don't need that there. All right, let's take a look at that. Changing this to expenses. Now we have a list of expenses. Let's look and double check our data validation here. Right, looking in the data here, checking our data validation to make sure that it is accurate. And then clicking yes. And then this is expense type. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. Making the change to income here and then checking our data validation again, making sure that it's income. And now, of course, when we go into the data and we check our data validation, merge cells, it's okay. And we see that it is our data val. Let's go here again, check that here. Income type. Perfect. So that's what we got. And then lastly, we'll double check our other here, making sure that we have it. Data validation, making sure that it's different. Of course, we can look at the drop-down list. We know this is the 3 items of other, so we know it's working correctly. All right, very good. So our data validation is working. That's it for all of our on-sheet macros. That's it for all the macros that have to do with on-sheet. What I'd like to do now is focus on the document, right? So what do we want to do is some of the documents, we need to do a bunch of things right here. So I want to know, first of all, our unique lists, and we also want to get the browse folder. So let's get that in. Let's start out with the first one. Let's get a brand new unique list of all the years based on, of course, all the data here. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to go inside here, inside our document macros module and tax years. We want to load the unique list of tax years. So how do we do that? Well, it's relatively simple with an advanced filter, but we want to make sure that when we're running this type of an advanced filter that we don't use any criteria. The reason is there's no criteria. All I want to do is get a unique list of years, and I want to place those list of years here. So let's do that right here. The first thing what I want to do before I add that unique is I want to delete any or clear out any years that are associated here. So on this screen, we're going to clear out any years. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Income tax, that's our sheet name, income tax dot range D5 through D999, let's just do 99, dot clear contents. Clear any existing years. Okay, next up, what I want to do, I want to really focus on the tax document database. So with tax doc database, we want to make sure we have the name right, so we're going to use the period. That triggers IntelliSense, and we know we've got the sheet name right. Okay, so moving on, one thing we want to do is we want to clear, I just want to make sure that we're clearing any previous results. Those previous results are going to appear inside our tax document database on columns right here, M3 all the way on down. So I'm going to clear that out first. So dot range M3, now we're focused on the database, through M999 dot clear contents. Dot clear contents. Clear previous results. Once we're ready to that, I want to get the last row. Now that last row is going to be equal to, based on column A, that's going to set us our last row of data. Last row of data. Now I use auto hotkey to automate that to help me a little bit faster. So now if last row is less than, in this case, 4, if that last row is less than 4, that means we have no data. So we're going to exit this sub. Now we're ready to run our advanced filter. But before we do that, when we're running an advanced filter without criteria, I want to make absolutely sure that there's no criteria, right? So the best way to do that is to make sure that we've deleted any criteria. So we can do this with dot names, and I've added on error resume next because if there is none, then it could create an error. So criteria dot delete, right? I want to delete any criteria. Delete any criteria. Now, if we're just using an advanced filter with criteria, it wouldn't matter, it'll replace the existing, but since this one has no criteria, and I'll show you that in a minute, we want to make sure delete any criteria and on air resume next. Okay, so now that we have that, we're ready to run our advanced filter, and I can automate that a little bit quicker using auto hotkey. Let's set up the data. Let's take a look at the data, right? I'm really focused on years, right? All I want is a unique list of years. So our original data is just going to be that, those tax years. Our original data is located directly inside only on B3. All I want is a unique list, B3. So that's all we have to do is put in B3, right? Our original data is B3 here, B3 through B in the last row. No criteria, right? There's zero. All I want is a unique list. So I'm going to clear that out. Remember, there's no criteria here. Where do we want to copy that to? We want a unique list. We're going to copy it directly to M2. So M2, we're just going to change this up and just change it to M2. We do want a unique list, true. That's very important. Then what I want to do is I want to determine the last row of those results. Once those results come into M3, right, I want to know the last results row. So the last results row is equal to what, right? Basically, it's going to be equal to not whatever's in M. So we're going to change this to M. This is the last row of the results. Last row of results. I want to check to make sure that those we actually have less than, right? If it's less than 3, exit the sub, that means we have no data. If it's less than 3, then no data. So if last results is less than 3, then exit the sub. If it is not less than 3, what I want to do then I want to also sort it, right? I want to sort it based on the first year first, right? But I want to check if there's only one row of data. Let's say that the last row is 4. There's no reason to sort it, right? So if the last, we can do that again using auto hotkey a little bit quick. If the last result is less than 4, then I want to do something. I want to go to, let's just call it single year. And then it's going to skip the sort. So we're going to do single year. And so what that's going to do is it's going to skip the sorting. We don't need to sort if we have a single row of data, but I do want to sort it based on the years. So now we're going to focus on that sort. We've got multiple rows of data. So with dot sort, and the first thing what I want to do is I want to clear the sort fields. Sort fields dot clear, clearing all those sort fields. Next up, what I want to do is I want to add a sort field clear, right? I want to sort them based on the year, so the lowest is first. So dot sort fields, and then we'll add a key, right? And what is that key is going to be equal to? It's going to be add, let's call it key, is going to be equal to, and we got to call out that sheet again, tax document database, because we're inside a sort, dot range M3, that's our key, right? And now what I want to do is I want to sort on. I want to sort on, of course, based on sort on values. So sort on equals XL sort on values. And then what I want to do, I want to sort it by ascending. So order is going to be equal to XL ascending, right? We want it from the smallest to the largest, ascending, okay? And then last one, we want to make sure I spell that right, probably not. Ascending data option equals XL normal, sort normal, right? Sort normal. Okay, let's take a look at that because usually I mess this up. Add fields tax document, M3, that's our range, right? That's our first sort on values, order equals ascending, data option equals normal. Looks pretty good. Okay, what I want to do is I want to set the range. That's pretty simple. So we're going to set the range of that. Of course, this is going to be based on M3 in the last year. Again, what we want to do is we want to make sure we're calling out the sheet tax doc database dot range M3. Of course, that's the first one through M and the last results row. Last result row. Okay, that's where we're going to sort. And the last thing is dot apply. Okay, so we're just going to apply that there. So we can apply that. We're good. That's end of the sort. That's all we need to do. So once all the data gets sorted, then all I want to do is bring over those results. Now I want to bring over those results whether it's a single year or multiple years. So skipping that, now we're ready to bring it over. Okay, so we're going to do income tax. This is where we want to bring in our dot range. We want to put it in row D5, right? The first row here is D5 of our income tax, all the way through D in the last row, and the last results row. Last result row. However, notice our starting row here is on 5. Our row here is on 3. So we need to compensate for that. So I'm going to add 2 onto that. Dot value is equal to, based on, again, our dot range, based on our database here, dot M3 through M and the last results row. Last result row. Same as our range, dot value. Okay, so that's going to bring over basically all the years. Okay, good. Saving our work here. We're going to run the macro. Always want to save before we run our macros. So we're good to go. Okay, let's run that macro and see what happens. We've got our years here. Let's take a look inside our income tax here. And we've got our years here. Now we've got 2018 all the way. The only other thing I want to clear that, probably when I run this, I probably want to clear the selected row, probably, right? So let's go ahead and clear out B2 as well. And then we can do that all the way up here. So as we add the taxes, I'm going to add B2 to that, right? B2. Because when we resort the list, we really want to clear out that sort of. Let's run it one more time here and take a look here. Okay, take a look. All right, that's good. I like that. It cleared out the selected row. I'm going to center that all the way down here, and we'll get it centered. All right, so we've got this data centered there. Looking pretty good. That's very nice. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to load all of the documents that are associated to that year. Okay, so when I run this macro, remember we've already added the macro, I want to load all the documents associated with the year. So we're going to run an advanced filter, right? When I click here, that's exactly what happened. I want to know what year. I want to set a criteria based on the year. How do we do that? Well, we can do that right here. I want to set that tax year. Notice the tax year is here already. Criteria based on whatever row we've selected. How do we know what row is on? Well, here's what we do know. We know that this is row 6, right? If we use an indirect formula, and I know that we're going to do from column D and whatever's in 5, I can extract the year using the indirect formula. And we're going to use that right here. So if error, indirect, again, focus on income tax, column D, and whatever's in B2. And of course, that is also going to be using A1 style, so it's true if there's an error, show blank. That is what's going to happen as soon as we have it. If we have the criteria here, we know what year to filter by. We can take all this data. This is just some extra data. We don't need that. Here, we can take all this data here. And then what I want to do is I want to know all of the documents associated in that specific year. I want to put the results in right here. Then I want to bring all this information over, and I want to bring it directly. Remember, I said the document ID is going to be hidden, kind of, and it's going to go in column E, the document name and the document type. So again, document ID, document name, document type, bringing all that information in. Okay, so let's write a macro to do that right now. And that's going to be next up on our macro list. It's called document loads list. So that's what we're going to do right now. So let's set that up here. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing we're going to do is, again, we're going to do clearing out all the information just as we did before. So what I can do is just copy that here and then update let's go this. I want to copy this one here. And then we're going to update this. So I'm going to, instead of course, B2, it's going to be B3. I also want to clear out any selected document row based on B3, but I also want to clear out all the documents and that's going to be located from E, starting in that E, all the way through G, right? So again, what I want to do is I want to clear out when I'm reloading this list, I want to start out clearing that document ID all the way starting at E5 all the way through G and clearing it out. Okay, clearing out all the existing, right? That's going to get us. Again, we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to run an advanced filter, but this time we're using criteria, and we want those results coming in here. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing as we did last time, just a few different things. Again, we're going to focus also, of course, on our tax document database. I also want to make sure that B2, right? I cannot load. Remember, just to be able to check, right? If we have no tax year, it's going to create a problem, right? We need to make sure that B2 contains a value. We must have a selected tax year, right? So how do we do that? So I want to make sure that B2 contains a value, just in case it doesn't, just an insurance program. So if income tax dot range B2 dot value equals empty, then let the user know message box, please select a year. Exit sub, right? Nothing we can do unless we actually have a year exit sub. Okay, good. So now we've got that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to focus pretty much primarily on that document database. So with tax doc database, making sure that we have it right. Again, what I want to do is I want to get that last row, not that one. Again, what I want to do is I want to get that last row. That last row is going to be based on column E, right? If the last row is less than 4, then exit the sub, right? And then what I want to do is I want to run my advanced filter. So we're good to go as long as we have data. So the advanced filter, of course, we're going to use more data this time. So what do we want to do? I want to get all that document information. I want to bring that in. So let's take a look at what results we want to focus on and get that. So inside our tax database, of course, we need the document ID, we need the document name, and we need the form type. Document ID, form type, and the document name. So we need to go all the way from A through F. I need to bring all that information here. So original data is going to be right here under A3, right? Our row headers are on column 3 through F. That's what I want. Where's our criteria? Our criteria is going to come directly from here. That tax year is going to be our criteria here. 02 through 03. 02 through 03. That's what's going to be our criteria. So I'm going to update that from 02 through 03. And where do we want those results going to come from? Those results are going to come from Q, go into Q through S. Q2 through S, and we want unique B2. That's going to get us our results. Then we can focus on our results. So the last results row is going to be equal to, of course, going to be focused on Q, right? Q is going to be our last. I'm going to use Q is to get our last results row of those results. So that's going to be column Q. And of course, if it's less than 3, then we can exit the sub out. So if the last results row is less than 3, then exit the sub. Assuming that we have data, then we can now move on. I can bring that information over. So how do we do that? Well, that's relatively simple. So tax, so let's do income tax dot range. Of course, focus on E5. E5 is the first row and the first column through G and the last result row. Again, +2 because our starting row is on 3 and our database dot value is equal to dot range Q2 through S and the last results row. And that's going to bring all the way over that. Okay, so Q3, our first results row, 3, not 2. Good, I like that. That's going to bring all the information over. Okay, so let's copy that. Now, we remember this macro document load list automatically is already set to run as soon as we make a selection change on year. Remember, here's our selection change, D5. If document loads list, this automatically set to run as soon as we make a selection change on the year. So when we go back into income tax and we can save our work before running the macro and we select a particular year, now we have it. Okay, so now here we see the rows. We know the rows are there, but we don't need to see them so obvious. So I'm just going to change the color of them, make them a little bit lighter. Generally, you want to make them the same color as the background, but we'll do that. We'll make them a little lighter. But for your purposes, you want to make them the same color, or you can use 3 semicolons in the formatting to hide them entirely. So now we've got our document ID. Now when I make a selection change, look, we have the document row that's loading in. Everything's good. So we have the document ID here. As we load it in, that document ID is loading exactly the way we want to. Now all we need to do is run the macro that's actually going to load the information, right? So now we know what document row 11, right? So if we go into the tax document and we look in row 11, we know that we're going to load all of this information inside here. And we're going to use data mapping to do just that. We know the tax year is J4. We know the transaction type is N4. We know our tax returns, the form other type is on M6. So we know that those ranges. So we also have some columns. We know that in looking row 1, we know the tax year is J4. We know the transaction type's N4. We know the form types is M6. So knowing that information here, we can then bring in our data mapping very, very easily onto that. So let's do that right now, saving our work. And we're going to run the macro that's actually going to load that information in. And that's going to be our next macro up. So we're going to go into the document macros here, right here. This is our sample. I don't want to get you confused with that. And then so we're going to now load it. I think we can close that sample out. Okay, sample's closed. All right, so what I want to do is I want to bring all that information in. So let's go inside back that tax document, and we have save update, right? So we've got a save update, but let's add load. Let's skip that. I want to add that load, which is this one right here, document load. And then we're going to go back out because that's the next one in line. So loading that document is what we're going to do. It's relatively easy document. So let's add that in right now. So the first thing is we're going to do is I want to clear out a bunch of cells, right? I want to clear out all those cells. So we're going to focus primarily on that. So with income tax, and I want to clear out a bunch of rows. I just copy and paste. It's kind of a lot of typing. So let me just copy that from some sample I got here. Make it a little bit easier on me and you so you don't have to watch me type in all those ranges. So basically, I want to clear out all those cells. That makes it easier for both of us. Then I don't cry. All right, so what I want to do is if there's a preview, remember we're going to have a document preview up in this space here, right? And so what I would like to do is I want to give it a specific name each and every time. I'm going to call it document preview. I want to make sure that when we're loading it, that preview of that document gets deleted. It's always going to have a very specific shape. If it doesn't exist, it could create an error. So dot shapes, I'm going to call it doc preview, give it a very simple name, dot delete, right? I want to delete it and then on error resume next, on error go to 0. And the reason is that if it doesn't exist, it could create an error. So we want to wrap that. Also, what I want to make sure is when we're loading a document, the most important thing is that we have the database row that's associated with that document. That database row is located directly here inside B5. If that is empty for any reason, then we know we have an incorrect. The reason is we could have a new document, so we want to make sure that B5 contains a value. If not, we need to let the user know. So if .range B5 .value equals empty, then let the user know. Message box, please, just let them know, please select a document, and there's nothing we can do unless we have that exit sub. And now I have dimensions already, some variables up here to help us along. I've got document row, which is going to help us, and document column. We're going to need those things. And of course I have last row, which we're using, and result row. So those are all up at the top. So I want to get that document row. That document row is going to be exactly in B5. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to put that up here. So document row is equal to whatever B5. That's our document row. Once I have that document row, then what we can do is we can then load it up. Okay, but what I want to do is just to make things a little bit faster, I'm going to turn off screen updating. So application, screen updating equals false. And I want to make sure we don't exit the sub and we turn it on before we do it. So just copy that here and then make sure that we're turning it on before the macro runs. That's going to make things a little quicker. Equals true. So inside here is where we're going to do the work. So inside there, what I want to do is I want to run, of course, a loop. I'm going to loop through all the columns in that. So how do we do that? We already have the ID. So that's in column 1. So we've got column 1 covered here, the document ID. So what I want to do is I want to run it all the way to, let's say, our notes. And what is our notes? Equals column 9. So I want to run a loop from column 2 to column 9. And we have a variable called document column to do that. For document column equals 2 to 9. And making sure to close our loop, next doc column. Okay, and inside that loop, what I want to do is I want to load the data. That load dot range, where's it going to come from, right? So we know to make sure that we're going to load it up. We have that range located inside where? It's located inside the first row, tax, document, database. Remember that range on row 1, cells, row 1, and document column. That's our range, dot value. So this right here is our range. This is M right here. This is M4, J4, whatever. That's our range. So dot value is going to equal what? It's going to equal whatever is inside the row of that. So tax, document database dot cells, whatever is in that row, not clear arrows, I never use that, dot cells, and then what is that row? That document row. And what is the column? That document column. Whatever data is in there, I want to bring over dot value. Okay, so that's what that's all we need to do. It's very, very simple to bring in all that data using data mapping. If you haven't seen it before, then just go. So great. What I want to do is I want to add in some additional information. So I want to make sure that the document preview. Now let's say I want to run a macro, which we're going to build coming up next. If we have a document path located in J8, I want to make sure that that preview of that document is visible, runs a macro. So we're going to check if J8 does not equal empty, then we're going to run the macro that is going to actually load that document preview. So we're going to check on that right now. If .range J8 does not equal empty, then run the macro. What is that macro that's going to load that document? It's right up here, document preview. There's nothing in here now, but we're going to be adding it up. Then run the macro. If there's a value, run macro to preview document. And those documents can be PDF, pictures, or whatever. All right, great. So we've got that now. So it's going to run, and that's it. That's all we have to do on that sub. So it's pretty much easy, relatively easy to load that information in. Okay, great. Saving our work before running the macro. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to load it up. Now, of course, we don't need the extra S in there. That's certainly not necessary. And then we also need to add in the correct variable, which is dot column here. Continuing on. Okay, it looks good. All right, so we've got all of our information here. Perfect. I like the way that looks. All the information. Now what I'd like to do is get that visible. Let's say get that preview of that picture or whatever that document. I want to place it directly inside P. So let's do that now. Let's write the macro because it's part of continuation. That's going to preview that document. So continuing on, we're going to go back up here. We want to show document preview. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, one important thing is we need to know where it's located. It's going to be located in a specific folder that we've already outlined. We've outlined it here inside this Dropbox folder. I want to make sure that we're browsing for the correct folder. I want to make sure that that path is located here. If not, we can browse for it here. I don't believe I have a macro assigned to that, but we'll browse for that. We'll be adding the macro, but you could just easily paste, of course, the path in there, but we'll add the macro. Okay, so we have it. So it's going to be located here right in C3, and I've given it a named range called document folder. Document folder. That name range, I'm going to copy that. That's what we're going to use. We want to make sure that that's accurate, right? I want to know, because if that's not accurate, if we have no folder that's located, and of course, we cannot load the document. So that's the first thing we want to make sure inside our document preview. So we're going to focus on with the income tax. With income tax. And also the first thing we also want to do is I want to delete any existing preview. I'm going to paste this here just for a moment. And what I want to do is, again, just like we did before in clearing that out, I want to delete any preview. I'm just finding it here where we added it in. Don't remember. So here it is right here. So I want to copy this here. Basically, we're going to do that, right? When we were loading a brand new one in, we want to delete any previous one, right? So that's all that's going to do is delete any previous document preview, so we can add that in. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I want to make sure that we have the right document folder. That's what we're going to focus on first. First of all, let's put in the file path. I've got some strings already set up to mention document folder here, file path here, and file name here. We're going to be using those. So let's update that. Also, we need texture and a few other things. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to set that file path. That file path is going to be located in J8 equals whatever's in .range J8. That's the full file path .value. Okay, so that's it. That's all we need here to make sure, because if it's not correct, then we're good. So if the file path is empty, then we're going to exit this. This is going to be the document file path. So if that's empty, we can get rid of this for now. We'll need it in a minute. If the file path is empty, right, then we know it's incorrect, or perhaps if it's incorrect or if it's empty. So how do we know that? So first of all, we can do if, let's do this file path equals empty, then exit the sub, just in case sub, just to make sure, right? Exit on no file path, nothing to load up. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to check to see if it's accurate. Okay, so here we can go this. If the directory of the file path.vb directory equals empty, that means there's something wrong. Or then what do we want to do? Then of course I want to let the user know. Message box, let's see if we can spell it right this time. What is that message box? Well, I want to let the user know, please make sure to make, let's say, the document file path is correct, or browse for a new path. Okay, then let the user know to browse. So we're going to write a macro, right? We're going to browse for document path. That macro is going to be up here, browse for document file, right? I want to let the user know to browse for it. That's the macro we're going to write in just a moment, but we're going to give them the opportunity to do that. Once they do that, then they can get the right path. So that's very easy. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that file path one more time, right? Giving them the opportunity to browse for it, copy it, and then if it's still empty, setting that variable one more time. Set variable again. Now if it's incorrect or it's empty, now we're going to do if, I'm going to copy this one more time. If it's still empty or still incorrect, then we're going to exit. If, then exit, or we can do or, right? Or it's empty. Let's say it's complete or it's empty, or file path equals empty, then exit sub, right? Giving them a second chance, but if not, then exit the sub out. Exit on incorrect path. Very good. So that's all we need to do. Let's fix that up, or file path, then got to put the if in there. That's kind of important. Continuing on, now that we've made sure that we do have a correct path and everything's looking good, what I want to do now is I want to make sure that our tax summary is visible, right? What I want to do now is I want to just run a check, right? If they're clicking on this area here, I want to make sure that column II is visible. It might not be visible if we're showing this. If we're showing these columns, it would not be visible. So I want to just double check to make sure that it's visible. If not, show it, okay? So we can do that with this check here. So if dot range I through I, I'm going to check on that column, dot entire column, dot hidden equals true. If it's hidden, then I want to run a macro that's going to be called tax summary hide, right? So inside here, I want to show the tax summary. So, right, tax summary, I want to hide, I want to hide the summary. I want to hide that summary. Hiding, I want to run a macro. It's called hiding this summary. We don't want that hidden. And I want this visible, right? So if they click on here, but the tax summary is visible and this section is not visible, we need to make sure that this section is visible by hiding the summary. So we're going to run the macro called tax summary hide. So that's all we're going to do in here. So I'm going to copy that here, then hide. So run macro to hide summary, and we'll call this show doc info. All right, so that's kind of important just to make sure. All right, so once we have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off screen updating. Application, make it faster. Just in case, dot screen updating equals false. And make sure to turn on. It's probably not necessary because we've already marked it false already, so just in case, and then turning on to true, but probably not necessary. I think I'm going to remove it because I think it's not necessary because we've already done it on here, right? We've already turned it off on here. We're already turning it off, and we're showing the preview, right? So before we set this to true, we're already running it. There's no need to do it twice, so it's probably not necessary. Good to go. We can get rid of that one line. So what I want to do is I want to set that file type. I want to know what the file type is. That file type is very important. If it's a picture, we need to do something. But if it's a PDF, if it's a Word, if it's Excel, we need to do something else. So we need to determine what the file type is. So how are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to use the last, basically, 3 or 4 digits of that, right? That path is very important. Is it .jpg? If it's .jpg or PNG or GIF, then we know it's a picture. Otherwise, it's some other document type. So we're going to set that file type. We're going to use the write command, and I'm going to use the file path of that. And I also want to determine the length. So I want to know the last digits, the length of the file path, right? I want to get the right part of it. So the right length of the file path minus, what I want to do is I want to find that dot, right? Where's that period? But I don't want the first, in case that name contains periods, I want to use the last one. So how do we find the last one? We can use in-string reverse for that. And what that's going to do is going to find the last character. File path, and what character am I looking for? I'm looking for that period. So it's going to find the last one of that. So what that's going to do is going to get us the extension, get file extension. Once we have that, we can determine what document type it is. Let's add that quote in there. That's important. So once we have that, right, we can determine, then what we'll want to do is based on that file type, we can use a select case. So select case is a great feature here. Case, and what type of case is it? We're going to use it based on that file type. Now, if that file type is a picture, case is equal to, right? Let's say PNG, or maybe it is JPG. Let's see, JPG. So these are for picture file types, or maybe it's GIF. It's called GIF. Or maybe it is a BM or JPEG, right? Let's choose JPEG because on a picture type, we want to do something else, JPEG. Or otherwise, maybe it's a BMP, right? I'm only focused on, you can probably add a lot more than this, but I'll add some BMP. And lastly, we'll do JPG, right? With JP, we did that, JPG, I think that's, or TIFF, let's do TIFF, TIFF. Okay, good. So if it's those types, we know it's a picture type. So let's just add in a comment here called picture type. In a picture type, I want to do something else. What do I want to do? Well, I want to insert a picture. So dot pictures, dot insert. And what am I inserting? Well, I'm inserting the file path. And I want to set a name to that. So dot name is going to be equal to doc preview. So that's only if it's picture. What if it's anything else? Case, else. If it's anything else, I want to do something else. I want to insert an object, right? So here we're going to do .ole objects, and I want to add an object, okay? What type of object do I want to add? I want to add based on a file name. So that file name is going to be equal to the file path. And I also want to have the link is going to be equal to false, right? There's going to be no link. False, right? And I want to display as an icon and also false. Display as icon equal to false. I want to give it a specific name. That name is going to be exactly equal to the one we have. Equals the document preview. Very good. I like that. Good. So that's the only different thing we need to do. Everything else is going to be the same, setting the position, setting the height, regardless if it is a picture or an object, right? An object can be a Word, could be Excel, could be PDF. Lots of things work well. So now we can focus directly on that shape regardless of what it is. So we're going to do that with dot shapes. Because we've given it the same name, we can focus just on that doc preview. And what do we want to do with it? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to lock the aspect ratio. It's going to be equal true. That's really important because I want to make sure that it doesn't get contorted. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to set some maximum width and some maximum height. So if dot width, because I don't want it too big, is greater than, let's just say 470, then dot width equals 470. It's just going to set the maximum. Width equals 470. I also want to do the same thing for the height. If dot height is, let's use something larger because we have larger, 700 pixels vertically, then dot height is equal to 700. Let's call this set max width, and we're going to set the max height. Set max. Very good. So now we set the both. Now I want to set the left position. The left position, where we want to place it. Let's take a look here. I want to place it somewhere right around P4. Let's take a look. Right about here. Right about P4 is where I want to set it. So let's set that left position based on P4. So the left is equal to, and again, we need to call out the sheet in this case, income, taxes, we're inside another width, dot range, P4, the left position of that, dot left, set left position. Now all we have to do is just set the height, set the top position. Dot top is going to be equal to, again, we can just copy this. We've already done it. We're going to set the top position based on P4. That's it. And paste it in there and set that top position. Set top position. Okay, very good. That's end width. We need to make sure that everything else is set. We're going to close those spaces up. We are good to go on that. I like that. And then, all right. I like that. Saving our work again, always before previewing. Now remember, this macro is set to automatically run. If there's any issues, we'll find out real quick. And we'll take a look. All right, we're good. All right, let's take a look. Oops, put this in the wrong area. Wrong, this is in the wrong. So we want this in preview. There's where I want to drag it right here. Preview, right? Browse for document folder, something different. So we want to put it in the preview. There we go. All right, let's take a look at this, see if there's any issues. All right, that's looking pretty good. Shows nice. Let's take a look at this. Shows that right where we want it. It's looking really nice. I like that. We need some more spacing here because we're going to bring that over. So let's bring that over. Okay, that's looking pretty good. It shows the pictures, shows different things. I like it. It's looking really good. Okay, continuing on, what else do we have? I want to make sure that we put everything in here, making sure. Okay, let's take a look at that. Bug, making sure. All right, let's change this to true. For Word documents, we need to update that. There we go. Okay, continuing on. So this is a Word document. Let's take a look at that. That looks nice. Okay, Word documents, MSOC true didn't work. True works just fine for both. That's going to be good. All right, looking very, very lovely. Now we've got the documents loaded. We do need to browse for the file. We need to do two browse. I need to browse for the specific file. I also need to browse for the specific folder here. So let's add in those macros here. Okay, so now we got the macro in the document preview. Browse for document folder, browse for document file. Those are remaining. We've done everything else up to them. We'll go and try to go in order now, and we have save and update. But I want to make sure that it flows properly. So folder and file are two good ones. Let's add those in right now. So for the document folder, all we need to do is just set some information up. So we're going to do that right now. So browsing for the folder. Once we do that, or we're going to dimension the document, right? First of all, I want to dimension this just so you can see how it's done here. Document, I want to make sure that document folder is different than the named range. Remember, just keep this in mind, make sure that they're different because that can create issues. Remember, we have a specific name range called document folder. I want to make sure that we're using a different variable and not document folder. So we're going to use document, and then we'll just use something called folder as file dialog. So now what I want to do is I want to set this document folder equal to this. So I'm going to copy that, and we're going to set it what type of it. It's going to be a set document file, and then it's going to be equal to application.file dialog. And what type of file dialog do we want? We want, of course, a folder picker, right? In this case, we're searching for a folder. Browse for the document folder. That's the one we want. So that's going to be folder picker. And now we're going to focus on with that specific one we created, with the document folder, what do we want to do? Well, the first thing I want to do is give it a title. So I'm going to, title is going to be equal to browse for document folder. And then also what I want to do is I want to allow multi-select, and that's going to be equal to false, right? We only want them to select one folder. And then if.show, right, does not equal -1. -1 is going to be meaning they've selected someone. Then go to no selection. And that's just basically going to drop it down below that so that there's no issues. No selection. And then we're going to call this no selection. Then go to no selection. Okay, so but what if they have selected something? Inside the admin.range, I want to put it right there. And it's going to be, we could put it in, let's say C3, I believe it's going to go into. C3 is the range it's going into, so that's where we're going to place it. C3, exit out of there. C3 dot value equals dot selected items 1. So it's the single selected item that go, and that's going to put that full file path of that folder in there. And that's it. That's all we have to do. Now let's go ahead and check for that and make sure that we are browsing for the correct documents folder. And this particular folder is where everything's going to go. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to make sure that that's attached to this browse folder. So I'm going to put it to the entire button set, assigning that macro, pasting that in, clicking OK. Now when we browse for it, we can see that we've browsed for it. Okay, that looks really good. We're going to set that document folder up to, setting it up to here, our documents folder, where everything's going to go, clicking OK. All right, I like that. That's looking good. Now what I want to do is browse for the file, the macro that's going to actually browse for that file. So once I browse for that file, I want to copy that and put it in the associated folder. So what we want to do is give the user the opportunity to browse for any specific file. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy that into whatever year they've selected. So we certainly want to make sure that they have a year. So dimension, right, the doc file as a file dialog. Okay, now with the income tax, I want to make sure that they have a year. Without having a year, we can't put it into any associated folder. So if, right, let's take a look at what year, right? Take a look inside here. I want to make sure that J4 contains a year, right? We want to put the documents into individual year folders, just as you saw. Without a year, then we don't know where to put it. So we want to make sure that J4 contains a value, or let the user know if .range J4 dot value equals empty, then message box, let the user know, please add a let's call it tax year before adding any documents. That way we know what folder to copy it into, documents. Okay, that's pretty good. And then exiting the sub. Without a year, can't do anything else. Assuming that we have a year, let's put that into a variable. Tax year is simply equal to whatever is inside J4. And that's going to set up our tax year inside a variable. It's going to be a string variable. It's a number, but we're going to use it as a string. Tax year, obviously self-evident. Continuing on, what I want to do is I want to check for the accurate document folder, right? If we don't have a correct folder or there's some issue with this, like when you get this file, I want to make sure that let the user know, hey, you got to get a get a proper document folder before we can continue forward. So we're going to check that for now. So we can do that. The first thing, let's put this comment, check for accurate document folder. So we're going to set that into a variable called the doc folder is going to be equal to admin.range. And then also we have a named range, which we can use here, right? Document folder, that's our named range that we've already set, dot value. And I also would like to add a backslash onto that. So we're going to use the and, then we'll set the backslash onto that so that we can do that backslash onto that, okay? Because we're going to need that. And it's going to be called that document folder, obviously. Continuing on, what I want to do is I want to make sure the accuracy of that. So let's do this. If the directory, checking that, doc folder.vb directory equals empty, or we can check the admin now, admin.range, this one, document folder, if that's empty as well, document folder dot value equals empty, then let the user know. You can use empty or double quotes, they will both work just fine. Then let the user know, message box, please set a document folder. Okay, so we have one, right? We're browsing for the document folder, so we can do that right up here. Document folder, we can just prompt the user to browse for the document folder at that point, right? So we can continue on. So letting them run macro to browse for doc folder. Okay, good. Now I'm going to run one more test, right? If it's still empty, then we're going to exit out of the sub. So I'm going to copy this after that point, and then we're going to run if. If, right, either one of these conditions are empty, then exit sub, right? Giving them that second chance, but if then still empty, then continuing on. Okay, so assuming that they've passed all those texts, now what I'd like to do is I want to set the document file, right? This one, document file. So set document file, and it's going to be equal to the application.file dialog, right? And this one's going to be a file picker. So this one, we're going to look for file picker. I want to do a specific file picker. So now with the document file, we're going to do something. We want to do a few things. First thing, what I want to do is give it a title, right? So the title is going to be equal to, let the user know, browse for document file. So now that they have a proper title that they can go onto, I want to add additional information, right? I'm going to let them know that they can select any type of file, any type. There's no filter onto it, so we're just going to add this kind of filter. Filters.add, in this case, right? I just want to put in select file, and then a comma, and then what kind of file can they select? Well, any type of a file. So I'm going to use the asterisk here, and which is the wildcard, and then we're going to use the period, and then we're going to use the asterisk one more time, meaning it can start with anything and end with anything. And then all just do one, right? So that's the position. One is the position. And then allow multi-select, in this case, no equals false, right? They're not allowed to multi-select. And then again, we want to make sure that they've selected something. If .show does not equal, -1 would be meaning they have selected something, -1, then go to no selection, just as we did above, right? Next look. And then going no, creating an out for them, no selection, and then adding a colon onto there. Okay, but if they have selected something, what do I want to do? Well, I want to do a few things, right? I want to set that file path into a variable. And I also want to set the file name. So the file path is equal to .selection, select items 1. That means the full file path, I also want to set the file name. What is the name of that file? It's going to be equal to the directory of that file path, equal directory of this file path. So we're going to set, this is the file name here, okay? That is the file name. So we've got both because I want to set, why is that important? Because I want to set the default file name. I want to place that directly in here, and then they can change it, and the full file path is going to go here. But what I want to do from wherever its current location is, I want to copy that into the proper folder, right? Now, no selection. If they haven't selected anything, we can't continue, so we can exit out of that. So everything's going to be written down in here. Okay, so the first thing what I want to do is, we've checked it. I want to make sure to check to see about that file path. So let's update that file path. It's actually going to be more than that. That file path is not just that, right? It's more than that if I want to set a different file path. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I know that sounded kind of confusing. It was for me too. If the file path, so here's what I want to check. Now you're browsing, you're pulling it from a folder, but what if you're pulling it from the same folder that you actually want to put it in? If it's already in the right place, then we don't need to copy it over. So I want to check for that. So let's do that. If the file path is equal to, right, .selected items 1, that means the current file path, Then go to, let's just put incorrect folder. It's already in the correct folder, so we can skip all that. Incorrect. We can skip copying it over folder. Okay, so we don't need to copy that if it's already in the place we wanted to put it. Okay, so that's good enough. So we're good. So let's go ahead and set that new file path. I want to put that new file path and I want to put it in something else. But before we do that, I want to update the file path. I want to be, not only do I want it on that, I want to select it up. So let's switch these. I want to put the file name first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to update that file path based on the tax year. So that file path is going to be equal to the document folder. Okay. And I want to put the tax year in. The tax year, right? Because I want to put each individual has to have that tax year. And I want to put in the backslash onto that. So there, that's going to be that full file path. So that, let's do that. Backslash here, right? And I want to make sure that we're putting in that file name, right? And the file name. That'll be it. Okay, so that's our full file path of our destination. Let's put that in here. Let's add that in. Destination file path. Destination file path. Okay, so it's our document folder, our tax year, and our file name. That's where we want it to go to, right? We've already added the backslash onto this up here, right? We've already added that up here, so we don't need that here. So the document equals the tax year and the file name, and don't forget the and file name. Okay, so we've got our file path set already. Now what we want to do is now here we've got our new file path equal to our existing file path. If they're the same, I like that better. Okay, so that looks correct. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that do we have a folder for this tax year or not, right? If not, I need to create that folder just to make sure. So we can do that with this. If the directory of the doc folder and the tax year VB directory, I just want to know to see if that folder exists or not, equals empty. That means that tax year folder doesn't exist. There's no folder, right? In this case, let's take a look at this here. We have our tax manager, our documents here. I want an individual 2018. I want those folders. I want those. I need to know, does it exist or not? So we can do that. If it doesn't, equaling empty, then we can make the directory. Then make the directory. And what directory do we want to make? Simply this right here, which is the document folder and the document. That's going to add that year folder onto that. So there we go. So what that's going to do is going to create folder if needed for the year. All right, good. So we've created the folder just to make sure that that exists. And now what we can do is we want to make sure that does the file exist in the folder or not? If we're copying a file from one location to another location, it's going to create an issue if that file exists already in the folder. So we need to check that. So let's do that right now. If the directory file path.vb directory does not equal empty, then we need to remove it. Maybe we're making an update, then kill the file path. So that's going to delete if exists. Now, here's the important thing. This is why we're skipping this, right? If that file name, if we're pulling it from the same file, that's why we're skipping it. It's already in the correct folder. So we're skipping this delete. So that's a very important distinction. Now, if it is not, now after we kill it, after we delete it, if it exists, now we're ready to copy the file from wherever the user has browsed for it into the new folder. So we're ready for that. So we can just file copy for that. File copy. And then we're going to all we need is the source. Now that source, of course, is the selected items. That's the source. And our destination is simply file path. Very simply. And that's going to simply copy the file to the new path. Okay, good. So we've taken into every consideration. All right, now that we have that, all we need to do is update J8 with the full file path, right? J8 can take on that. So income tax, and then actually we can do income tax here dot range J8 dot value equals, again, file path. Okay, set new file path. And I also want to do K10. I also want, again, as I mentioned before, I also want to put that file name, the default file name located right here in K10. So we're going to do that right now. So I'm just going to copy this and then update this to the specific range, which is K10. And that's going to take on that variable that we've already added called the file name. File name is going to be that, okay? We can also do the directory of the file path. We set it up. Now we got the file name. File name. Good. I like that. Set file name. All right. Now we have that. So what I want to do now is that we've browsed for that. What I want to do is run the macro automatically. So document preview, right? Once we've added that file, that's why I had that. Let's see if it's slow. Application screen updating, turning it to false and off and on, but I think it's going to be fine. So now what I want to do is I want to preview that document. Run macro to preview document. Good. And then if there's no selection, of course, they haven't selected anything yet. And with, and there we go, end sub. Now we can add that end width up there. So we need that. That's sufficient up there. All right. No selection and width and sub. I think it's perfect. This is the width for that specific document file. This is the width for that sheet, income tax sheet. Probably don't need to. So as long as, so if you see how it says income tax here, if I put that down here before the end width, right? If I bring that down here, won't matter too much, right? Between the end width, right? We're done with selection, but keep in mind no selection has to be after, right? If they've made no selection, we need to add that after. I'm gonna put that right here, meaning no selection. All right, good. So let's take a look at that. So now we're within inside the income tax sheet. So I can remove this here, just in case it's not necessary to have this sheet there because we're inside the width. We're no longer in the width of the specific document file here. All right, we've added that up. All right, so let's take a look at that. Saving our work before we run that macro. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna browse for that macro. It is this macro, browse for file dialog, that I'm going to attach to that button that we have created right here, and we grip it. So I wanna hold down the control on both the icon and the button, right clicking it, adding that macro, pasting that macro in here. And then we'll check for any issues and fix them accordingly. Browsing for that macro. Now we can browse for a file. We can use any file. I can even use an existing one, which is fine. And we have a form here, a PNG form, clicking OK. All right, and it browsed for that. It looked like it found it good, and it put the file name here. Let's add one more. All right, we're going to add one more here just to make sure that we can change it. Browsing for it here, clicking OK, making sure that it changes. All right, that looks really good. It's changed it. It's added that in here. It's put in that new file inside the year, right? Giving it a specific name, putting that name here. All right, we are looking really good. Of course, we can add an amount onto that, right, if we want to. Now what I'd like to do is, now we've added all the information, now we've previewed it accordingly, but we need to save this document, right? I need to make sure that it is either saved or updated, right? If it's going to be saved, if it's saved, it's a new one. How do we know if it's a new document or not? Well, we can look right here at the document row. We know if the document ID is gone from this, we know that document row is going to be empty. We know it's a new one. However, it's an existing one, we know there's a row associated. So it is the macro that's going to allow us to save it, and that's the macro that we're going to go all the way up here, save and update right here. That's the macro that I want to write now with you so we can show that how we actually save and update that. Okay, so the first thing what we want to do is I want to make sure that we have the required fields. So with income tax, I'm going to check on those required fields. One, of course, is a year, and we also want to make sure that we have a type. Those are really important. So I'm going to look for J4 and N4. We need to make sure that we have a year. We need to make sure that we have a type. So both of those are required. So if .range J4 .value does not equals empty, or .range N4 equals empty, in either one of those cases, let the user know equals empty. Then let the user know with a message box that those fields are required. Okay, well, let's call it tax year, and we have the other one. Of course, let's say, what are we calling that? Transaction type are required. Exiting the sub. We can't move on unless we have those. Okay, continuing on. Now that we know that we have those, we can set that tax year. That tax year is already a variable we created, and that's going to be based on whatever's in J4. So we can copy that. And then make sure we put equals and period. That's the tax year. Once I've got the tax year, I also want the document name. What is that document name? It's going to be located inside K10. Remember, K10 is going to take on our document name. Document name. So good. Now that we have our document name and tax year, now what I want to do is I want to determine, is it a new document or not? Remember, we just discussed that. I need to know that. And it's going to be based directly on what is located in B5. If B5 is empty, we know it's a new one. So if .range B5 .value equals empty, then new document. And then end if. Else existing document. So what are we going to do if it's a new document? If it's a new document, I want to do a few things. I want to set that document row. It's going to be the first available row, right? So we need to set that document row. It's going to be equal based on the database. The tax document database dot range A 9999 and Excel up dot row plus 1, the first available row, first available row. I also want to set that up, make sure that next document ID. Now we already know that next document ID. We're using the max formula, so I'm going to take that next document ID. I'm going to place it directly in B4, and I'm also going to place it in the first available column right here, in this B32 in column A. So I'm going to do those two things with the next document ID. So the first thing we're running, dot range B4 is going to be equal to whatever is located inside B6 is where it's set, the next available ID. So dot range B6. Okay, so that's going to take on there. 6 is going to be our next dot value, next ID. Okay, I also want to take it and place it in the column, right? So I want to put it directly inside here, A and that brand new row, the tax document row here. So A and the document row dot value is going to equal whatever's also inside B4 that we just placed in there. Okay, so we can place that right in there. That's also going to place that next ID. That's great. So we've also placed it. And also what I want to do is I want to place a document row. We may need that in the future, right? So that's kind of important. So I want to place the formula here in row. So that could be important. So I'm going to place that formula directly inside here. Okay, so that's going to go in column J. So column J, tax doc database dot range. I don't think we're using it in this training, but we might in the future. Doc row dot value equals that formula, right? That formula is right there. Set row formula. Okay, that's all we need to do if it's a brand new one, but if it's an existing, all we need to do is set the document row, and that's going to be based directly on whatever's in B5. So that document row is equal to whatever's in B5 document row. So now that we have that, now what we can do is, regardless if it is a new or an existing, we're going to run a loop using data mapping for the data. Let's call it doc column, just as we did more loading, it equals 229. And then we're going to close our loop. Next doc column. I'll move that up. Okay, so we have our loop here, and inside that loop, we're going to basically do the reverse, right? If we remember, we look down on here on the loading doc. Let's take a look in here. The loading, we did something very similar. So I'm going to copy that and just do the reverse of that. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to bring it right up here into the save right here. And that's where we're going to place it right here. So I'm going to paste that in here. But now we're doing the actual opposite. We're taking whatever is in the range and we're placing it inside the database. So moving our equals over here. So now whatever's inside this range here, we're placing it inside the database. So that's going to save data. So basically the opposite. Very, very easy to program. Okay, good. So we've got that. We've placed all the database. Now what I want to do is once I have updated this, right, I want to make sure, let's say we added a brand new year, right? Let's say we put in 2023, right? That year doesn't look, so I want to run the macro that's going to automatically load these tax years again. But I want to set that into a variable because I want to know what year was selected, and I want to make sure that that year is continued to be selected. So the best way to do that is simply to put those in two variables, okay? So we've already got the tax year and the document name into variables. Here, that's going to really help us going forward. Okay, so how do we do that? So the best thing to do now is set the tax years. So first I'm going to run the macro that's going to load in those tax years, right? I want to do that right in here. Let's load that macro. Where did it go? Tax years here, top of list. So I'm going to run the macro, and then I'm going to place that down under your save. So we're going to, let's say, refresh year list. And now what I want to do is I want to set the row, right? If I've just refreshed the list, right? If I've refreshed that list, we don't know what row selected. I want to look for the year, that tax year. If it's found on, let's say 7, I want to take that 7, I want to place it directly inside B2 if it's found. So here's how we're going to do that. So first thing what we're going to do is we're going to go to on air resume next. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to set something just like that. Dot range B2 is what I want to set. B2 dot value is equal to what? The row of which it's found on. I'm going to look for that row. How do I know where it is? So we can do this. Dot range D5, that's the year list, D5 through D, let's just use a large row, 999. Dot, what I want to look for, I want to find it. I want to find that tax year. Find, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the tax year. I'm looking at Excel values and Excel whole. And I want to return the row. I want to know the set year row. And I want to place whatever year it's found. I want to place that directly into B2. I also want to do the same thing for the documents, right? I want to set the same thing. And then we can do on, just in case it's not found, it could return error. So that's why we're wrapping it on error, resume next, and on error, go to 0. Okay, great. So now that we have that, I want to make sure that it's not empty. So if dot range B2 is not equal to empty, B2 dot value does not equal empty, then what I want to do is I want to set that document. Make sure that we've selected the right document. I will look for that document and find it. Dot range here does not equal empty. Then it's called on accurate selected year. Accurate selected year. This is going to be a long training. And if. They're all long. This one's going to be longer than normal. So let's take a look at that. So now what I want to do is I want to refresh the document list, right? We just created a brand new document or saved it. Maybe we updated the name. Maybe we don't know what we did. But what I want to do is I want to find it in this list and I want to make sure that it's the correct selected row. So what I want to do is I want to refresh this list. If I've just changed the name, this list must be refreshed, right? So we're going to run the macro that refreshed that list, right? The document refresh list. And it is this documents list load. So I want to run this macro to refresh the list of documents now. Okay, so we're going to run the macro, run macro to refresh documents. Okay, good. So now we also need to set what row, right? If I've just deleted that, we don't know what row. That row also needs to be set in B3, right? Set that selected row. So again, we can do that just like we did before. On error, resume next, and on error, go to 0, right? Wrapping that in case it's not found. I'm going to look for it. I'm going to place that row in B3. Dot range, B3, dot value equals what? I'm going to look for that. It's going to look for in a specific range. So what range is that? Dot range here, F, it's going to be looking at that document name. I'm looking for that in column F5 through F in the large row, 999. Dot find, what am I looking for? I'm looking for that document name. And I'm looking at Excel values and Excel whole. Good, so I like that and I want to extract the row from that. Set selected document row. Okay, very good. I like that. And now what we're going to do is we've saved the document. I'm going to run this little macro is going to do a save message. We need a shape called document save message. I forgot to create that, but it's no problem. Let's do it right now. I want a little save message that's going to go up here. So I think all we'll do is just duplicate. I'm going to copy this shape, paste it here, not the text, and copy this shape here, paste it here. That way it's got the same size. And we're going to call this document saved. Document saved. We're going to center that and give it a specific color here, center that, and then give it a little bit different, probably 1.4. Okay, and then I'll give it a nice color, shape, fill, something different, right? Let's do this here, and then give it a different font color. Okay, good. I like that. Let's do that, and then do this here, giving it that text. Perfect. Okay, I like that. Okay, so now we've got document saved. So again, I'm going to go back and copy this to make sure I've got copying the name of this message. Going back in here, I'm going to assign it that name. Okay. Now what I want to do is when the document's saved, I want this message to fade out. We've given it a name. We know it's document saved. I'm purposely giving it a different color. I like that. So this is basically going to fade out this. We've been over this before, but I want to run this macro when it's saved. And I'm going to copy this and I'll paste it down here. Run fade out message macro. Very good. As long as my voice is still with us. All right. I'm here for you guys. Okay. So it is that macro that we just created that we are going to assign to that button. So all I need to do is just copy this, check for any errors. Of course, we save before we run the macros. Assign that to both the button, holding down the control, both the button and the icon. Assigning that to the macro. Down here, assigning that. Don't need that part. No, not that part. Just the macro itself. Good. I like that. Saving our work before running. And then we're going to click Save. Okay. And we're going to check it out. See, now our document save message is fading out. That looks good. Okay, so it faded out. It saved everything. Very good. And let's make sure it's saved. Let's just do this test notes here, saving the document here. We need to add some borders around there. Going back out of it, back into it to make sure it's saved. It did. I think we need a border around here, don't we? Look better with a little bit of a border, I think. And then we can put that border around it. Not there, there, and there. Okay, looks good to me. Like it. All right, looking really good. It's saving properly. I like it. We have to add this new document, delete document, view tax summary. All right, let's do that. Those are relatively easy macros. Let's get those written up now. And we'll go down here. We've almost done with this little module here, document new, relatively easy. So let's get that done. Again, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that range here. We're going to work with our specific thing. All I need to do is we've already done it here. I'm going to add one thing here. So with income tax. Okay, I'm going to paste everything out. I want to add one more thing to this clear content range. And that means I want to add whatever document ID is located in B4. I want to clear that out too. So B4. I also want to make sure that, of course, we are deleting any type of preview that might be here. So I'm going to copy that and paste that up directly in here. So that's going to be for the new one. Okay, so what else do we have on the new? It's relatively simple. Maybe all we want to do is just prompt the user to select for year. So dot range J4, I'm going to have them select. That's the year, select. Okay, I like that. That is the macro. That's all we have to do. We're going to assign that macro here to that new button there. Okay, moving in, and then this document here. So holding down the control, and then what we're going to do is assigning that macro way up here. We don't need it there. Pasting that in, clicking OK. So again, always saving our work, especially when we use clear contents, right? Saving our work before running a macro. Clicking new. Everything looks good. Everything got cleared out. Let's add something. We need to add a tax year. Notice we have that. I've got a named range, formulas, name manager, right? We've got something called tax years here. That's the one that's going to be a named range on our tax years. That's sufficient. We can add that to a drop-down list. So data validation, right? Adding that data validation right here. And we're going to use a list, and we'll call that tax years. Okay, equals, don't forget the equals tax years. Okay, I like that. Now we have a drop-down list of tax years. We can add to it. We have a transaction type. Let's do it in expense. We have a 1099E. We can browse for a particular document. Anything is going to work for us at this point. Giving it a name, it displays properly. Fretters, and giving it amount. Okay, I like that. Let's go and test notes, making sure that we're adding that. Okay, saving that document. It assigned it that row, the ID, the row. Looking in our database all the way down here, everything got added in. The save is working quite nicely. That's looking good. And make sure that it got added in the right folder. Let's look in here. What folder was that? We just added in 2021 folder. So let's take a look inside the folder. That got added in accordingly. Taking a look, 2021 1099 form period. I got it in the right folder. Okay, that's looking really, really good. All right, new document. Now let's go to the macro that's going to delete the document. This one's very, very easy. So let's scroll down here. Deleting the document, very, very easy. So what do we want to do? First, I want to give the user a prompt to make sure that they wanted to do that. So we can do that message. I think I got that on auto hotkey to make it faster. There we go. Are you sure you want to delete this? Not appointment, document. That's auto hotkey. It's a free software. You can download it. That makes things a lot quicker. Otherwise, it'll take 6 hours instead of 3. So let's see, continuing on. Now that we know that they've wanted to delete it, what we want to do is with income tax, focus on that sheet. If I need to determine has it been saved or not, right? Maybe they want to delete it and it hasn't been saved, which is fine. So how do we know if it's been saved? Of course, we always use B5. It's going to let us know if B5 is empty, we know it hasn't been saved. If .range B5.value equals empty, then we need to skip, go to not saved. And that's going to drop it down here, not saved. And then all we need to do is just simply run the macro to add new beyond that. So that's going to be relatively easy. So what if it has been saved? If it has been saved, I need to extract that row. Document row is going to be equal to whatever's in B5. Extracting that inside a variable, okay, document row, because it's that row that we're going to have to delete inside our document database. So we can do that with the tax document database dot range document row, and okay, adding that colon there, and the document row dot entire row, not column, row dot delete. Okay, that's what we always say before, just in case. Deleting that row. Okay, so we're going to delete the row, and then that's it. That's all we have to do. Then what I want to do is simply run the macro that's going to add the row, right? Delete, let's put this, delete database row. Okay, so now that we have that, so now all we need to do to clear out the contents of this is simply run this macro here. Now we're going to run this macro regardless if it's been saved or not. So we're going to do here, run macro to add new. Okay, so that's going to be all we need to do. It's pretty much easy. Okay, good enough. Okay, And there we go. All right, good. So I like that. And then we can save that work, always save, and then assign that document delete macro to the button that we previously created. So going in here, delete document here, selecting here and here, right click, and then assigning the macro, pasting that in there, clicking OK. Okay, so that one we just created here, delete the document. Are you sure you want to delete the document? No, good, that works fine. Delete the document again. Are you sure you want to delete it? Yes. Okay, it's going to delete the document. Actually, what we need to do is refresh this list, right? We really need to refresh that list. Let's do that now. I like that. So one more thing to do, and that's refresh that document list. Kind of important, right? So let's go up here, scrolling up here, and look for that macro right here, document list here. That's the macro that I want to run on delete. Kind of important there. So going down here, right, and then document delete here, let's call this, let's reload document list. Okay, good. Let's try it one more time, making sure that that list gets updated here. Delete the document. Yes, let's put in yes. And good. Now we've got the list refreshed. I like it. Perfect. That way we don't have any issues. All right. It's looking really good. I like that. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to, what if we want to print that document? All right. Well, we're going to print the summary. That's going to be it for all the documents. We don't need anything else on here. That's sufficient enough. All right. Document delete. So we've covered so far, we're almost done. We've covered save, document, delete, view tax summary. Now we're going to focus on the tax summary. So what do I want to do? When view summaries click, I want to hide everything we have here. And I want to show this tax information. All right, so let's continue inside the module for tax summary. It is these modules that we're going to go into now. So we've got show and hide. So that's what we're going to work on here. So what do we want to do when I show it? Well, when I show it, I want to show a few things. Okay, so we're going to focus again on with income tax. Inside that sheet, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we're deleting any document preview. We don't need to show the document preview. So if there doesn't exist, of course, it would do dot shapes. Doc preview, right? When I'm showing the summary, we can delete the preview of the document. Dot delete, okay? Delete doc preview. We can always recreate it just by selecting it again, so it's no problem. Preview. Okay, so, and then on air resume next. Okay, so now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to show and hide certain shapes accordingly, right? So when I want to show that tax summary, right? We want to show the tax summary. What do we want to do? I want to hide this group. This group here should be hidden because this is all associated with the documents. So it's called the document group. That's the one I want to hide. So that's what we're going to do first. Dot shapes. This one here, document group, dot visible equals MSO false, right? Hide the document group, hide document group. But I also want to show the summary group. So dot shapes. And what is that summary group? What is the name that we assign to that, right? If we scroll over here, we've got 3 different buttons here, and we've got, let's reset that. So it's going to show that here. And didn't we assign it? Let's call that, make sure that we assign that a name for that. I think I may not have gotten to that. I thought, there it is. Tax summary group. That's the name we associated with those 3 buttons. That's the one we want to show visible. So it is that one, summary, dot visible equals and so true. So show summary group. So once I want to show, I also want to basically show, there's going to be a chart that's put in there. I want to make sure that we add a chart. We'll add in that later. So I'm going to show and hide that chart. We'll be creating that soon, give that a name. But also what I want to do is I want to hide certain columns. Which columns do I want to hide? Well, I'm going to hide, let's say I through Z, right? All of these columns here associated here, let's say I through Z, I want to hide those columns. So dot range, and then I through Z, entire column dot hidden, entire column dot hidden equals true, right? Want to hide all of those columns. Okay, so now we got the entire columns hidden true. And now what I want to do is I want to show the other columns. Which columns do I want to actually show? The summary columns. Those summary columns are AA through AE. I want to show these columns. Okay, so we can do dot range, and then this is called AA through AE. Those are the columns I want to hidden. Dot entire column dot hidden equals false. Okay, so we want to show those, right? And that's it. That's all we have to do. Okay, so the rest is basically just the opposite. So I'm going to copy this here and then just switch them around for hiding, right? When I want to hide that summary, I want to do exactly the opposite, right? This is probably not necessary here. We don't need that part here. Document group, of course, we're going to show that, right? So I'm going to do MSO C true and then comment show the document group. then this is going to be false, right? We want to hide the summary group, false, hide the summary group. Then I'm going to switch these to true and false. So this is going to go to false, and this is going to go to true. Then all we need to do is assign those buttons to the buttons that we've created. I like that. That's really good. So the show one, tax summary show, that's going to go on our first button that's located right here on the left side here, view tax summary. So I'm holding down the control, right click, clicking N, that's going to paste that in, and then tax summary show. That's the macro that I want to see. Again, saving our work for running the macros, view tax summary. Good. That's why we don't have any data in here, tax, but in a hide summary, I want to do that. Of course, and we can also search for that macro here. Tax summary hide is the one we want to do there. And then hiding the tax summary. Okay, I like that there. You see, all we need to do again is select that to show it. Perfect. Okay, that looks really good. So now what we want to do is I want to run a macro that's going to actually refresh the data. That's a very easy macro. Of course, it's going to be based on the selected year. I want all those transactions for the selected year to appear here. Okay, and that happens to be the next macro that we're going to write called tax summary refresh. And the first thing what I want to do is I want to clear out any data that might be in here. So from AA9 through AE, I want to clear all that data on. So income, let's focus with that income tax dot range AA9 through A through AE and a large row. Let's just do 9999. And then dot clear contents, right? We want to clear any existing transactions. Okay, so we've cleared all that out. Now we're going to really focus on our tax document with tax doc database, right? Because that's where we're going to run our advanced filter to get that. So again, first of all, we're going to get the last row. I need to know the last row of data, just as we did before. If the last row is less than of course 4, then we need to get out. So we use 4, right? Nothing else we can do if there's no data. Assuming that there is data, we can run our advanced filter just as we always. This advanced filter is going to go all the way starting in row 3, right? Our data starts on row 3 and it goes all the way to column J. So J in the last row. Okay, we want to run our criteria. Now our criteria is going to be based on that year. We already went over that year here. We know that that year is our criteria here. Our tax criteria is right here based on that indirect formula. So our criteria is going to be O2 through O3. And where do we want the results come? I want the results to come here. Some results that I've already set up here. So O2 through O3, and then our results are going to come from U2 through Z2. Okay, so let's set that up here. O2 through O3, and then the results, of course, are in U2 through Z2. U2 through Z2. Now we need to determine the last row of the results. So the last results row, of course, is going to be equal to range, and of course, not going to base it on column U, not A. So the last results row. If the last results are less than 3, then there's no data. So last results are less than 3, then exit the sub. Assuming that there is, then all we need to do is bring over that data. So income tax dot range AA9 through AE and the last result row. Now, of course, our data that our destination is going to start on row 9. Our original data is going to start on row 3, so we need to compensate for that by adding 6. Dot value is equal to dot range U3. That's our first row of the results all the way through Y. Remember, you're going to bring Y. Why is that? Because I don't want to bring the rows. What I was thinking is that we might need the path. We really don't need the path. So I'm just going to bring it over to Y. Y is the last amount. That's sufficient enough. We really didn't need to bring the document path over. But if we needed to loop through the documents for any reason, we could. So amount is Y is going to be the last column. That's sufficient. So Y and the last results row. And the last result row. Good. So that's going to bring over all the data over. And let's, of course, saving our work. And when do we want this to run? Well, I want this to run in a few different times, right? I want this to run automatically when we're going to show the tax summary. When we show that tax summary, I want this to run automatically. So run macro to refresh data. So every time we show that, it's going to refresh that data. That's going to be nice. That way we have it all the way over. So let's take a look at that and then see how that's going to work. And so we're going to hide the summary. We're going to view the tax summary. Check out, let's fix that bug. AA, clear the contents. One too many zeros probably in there. And then continuing on. Yep, we forgot a row. That's kind of important, right? So there we go. Very important, actually. Continuing on. Okay, and that's why we save our work. All right. Okay, so let's take a look. We got our data in here. That's looking good. But now what I want to do is I want to have a sum. I want to know the total income, the total credits. So how do we do that? Well, it's a relatively sum if. So equals sum if, right? And what are we going to sum it on? I want to sum the range, right? What is our range? Here is going to be our transaction type, right? So I'm going to go to a large row. Let's do 999. And it's going to be based on income, right? So I want to know only those that are income. And where's that sum range? It's going to be this amount here. So using the same number of rows, right? We want to go do that. And it's going to be 999. Good. So we've got the income. That's going to be the sum if. So we notice that we've got $45,000. Now what we want to do is do the same thing for credit. So I can just simply copy that, bring it down here and change it to expenses. So instead of income, I only want to focus. Others not going to be affected. So now expenses. Okay, expense. All right, so now we've got our expense. And of course, our total taxable income is simply our income minus our expenses and credits. Okay, and now we have our total taxable income. Perfect. Okay, I like that. All right, that looks really good. Now let's go ahead and put in a chart. We'll print a summary, zip an email. Very easy. Okay, so let's get a chart in for that. And let's go ahead and add a chart into that. This is the data that I really want to focus on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do insert, right? And we can do recommended charts, see what they recommend. Chart title, this looks pretty good. I like that. So we can select this and click OK. We do need to do a few things with it, of course. I don't want a chart title. And I don't want this rows here. And we don't want these. And I'll put labels, so we don't need that here. And good. Let's take a look at that. Let's shrink this down a little bit. And we're going to update the data on it. So we're going to add some additional filters and some additional information. I like the colors, but let's set a color there. And let's scroll this up. I'm going to set a color there. I like this color here. Let's go down with this color here. That's good. Now I want to add some additional information from that. I want to add, we got the series okay, but let's format the data in here. I want to format the plot area, just fix it up a little bit so we can look at it and make it look nice. So let's add in, let's take a look at, not the plot area, but the chart area. I want to add in some additional information here. Not so much. And inside the data series, so I'm going to select on the data series, and I want to basically reduce that width, right? Because we don't have a lot of space, so I think that's to be sufficient. And then I'm going to bring it down here, right? We only have a little bit of space to work with, and we have very, very limited. So I'm going to bring it down here, and like right about here. Okay, let's add a little bit more. I want to make it exactly the same, and then we'll add some data labels onto that, and then reduce that. Okay, that's looking good. Let's get rid of additional spacing here. We don't need it, and then we'll also update that accordingly. So we don't need the background here, so we can no shape fill on that, no fill on that, and then I'm going to update this. I'm going to add it. Let's drop this down. We'll be using it a little bit more for this customization, and then going into, I'm going to add this. Give it our green font, bold, and italic for that. And we want to add some data labels onto it. So I'm going to add data labels onto that. And then those labels, we're going to get those visible in just a second. Make it also them the same color, bold, italicized. Bringing those down. We don't need the extra spacing. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to move that and size it up accordingly there. And then we also don't need the extra there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. All right, we'll just size it up, bring it a little bit bigger than we need to. So make sure we compass all the data. Ooh, that looks quite nice. All right, good. We've got a nice little chart there. And now I want to give this chart a title. I want to make sure that we may not need to hide it. Let's hide the summary and see if it looks okay. That looks all right. I like that. It looks pretty good. And of course, it's good enough for our purposes. So we've got a nice little chart title there. We're good enough to go on that. Let's print the summary and zip an email, write those two macros, and then I'm going to let you go. Okay, so the last things that we have to do, print that summary. That's very, very easy. All we need to do is simply set our print range, and then all we need to do is just print it out. So let's write that macro right now inside that. So we're going to set, I've got the print range all the way up here as a string. So we're good to go on that. And so we're going to set that print range is going to be equal to, we need to set it to the equals to the income taxes. We don't know. We need to set the last row, dot range. And then we'll set the title AA4. That's our first row that we want to print through AE. And we just need to get the last row. And where's that last row? And income tax dot range. Let's use AA999. I want to know the last row of the data. Dot end. XLUp dot row. Okay. Dot address. Okay, so I want the address of that. That's going to set print address into a string, Okay, so once I have it into a string, I can then use the page setup. So income tax dot page setup. And then what are we looking at? I want to look at, of course, the print area is going to be equal to whatever's in the print range. So print range. Okay, so now that we have that, that's going to actually set the print area. Set print area. Once we have that, we can just print it out. Income tax dot range dot print out. And what do we want to print out? Well, I want to print out obviously from to all the copies. Preview, we don't need to preview it, so we can do that. Active printer, true. We want to set the active printer. Print to file, no, false. Let's do false on that. We don't need to print to file. Collate, print to file name, nope. Ignore print areas, and that's false. We don't want to do that. Okay, so I like that. That's going to do that. Now all we need to do, of course, is assign this macro to the button that we've created. So print summary is here. And then I'm going to hold down the control on those two buttons. Let's make sure I've got those. Holding down the control here and here, assigning the macro here, pasting that macro in, clicking OK. All right, so printing that macro here, it's going to print it to the default printer. Mine's Snagit, so let's minimize that. You can see that. Let's do that. Bringing that down here. All right, that looks good. It looks nice. Everything's printed. The tax summary for year ending. We need to add that year ending. That reminds me. Thanks for reminding. So we need to do that. That year ending is important. We need to, I've got a border around here. I don't want that. So, right, format, right, shape outline, and then no outline on that. Okay, there we go. And I don't want it here also here. So that outline's got to go. No outline. All right, that looks better. No outline on that. So tax summary. So what I want to do, we need to get that year. Well, how do we know that year? Well, we have that year here. We know a formula for that year here, right? So we can just add it here. And right, we know using the indirect. So we can just do that. That's going to set our year. Easy. We already set a year. So going back into the income tax, all we need to do is use the word, and we've already have this on the equals, which is what I want. And right, this if error. So that's going to set our year. Now we have the tax summary. Now as we change our year here, we see that automatically our data is automatically updated. We can increase this a little bit higher there so we get all of our data encompassed. I like that. It's looking pretty good. Okay, it looks really nice. So now, as we remember, I said, as we select a different year, we want that to refresh. So we already set that up in the selection change event. Looking really good. Print summary. Last thing is, I want to be able to take all these documents and I want to zip and email them and create an email. That's the last macro. Let's write that right now. Zip and email. I already have dimensions to help us move us along because it's already an incredible marathon training. So let's see what else we want to write. Inside that, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we set that print range, right? Just as we did here, I want to make sure that we're setting the print range. Not only do I want to zip an email, I want to create this into a PDF. I want to print this summary into a PDF, and I want to include this PDF inside the zip file as well. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to set that print range just as we did before. And also what we're going to be doing is setting up that print just in case. I'm going to set that print range just as we did before. Of course, we're not going to print it out. We're going to actually create a PDF to do that. So, but we set the print area. We did those things. Those are important. Okay, I also want to set the tax year. I want to know what is the selected tax year. But I'm not sure what document's going to be selected. So, but I do know based on a formula that that tax year is going to be right here inside 03. So I'm going to set that into a variable. So the tax year is going to be equal to whatever's in the database here, our tax doc database dot range 03. That's going to set our print range. Whatever's there, I want to know what that is. Dot value. Okay, it's going to be our tax selected tax year. Once I have that selected tax year, I want to check that we have an accurate document folder. Very, very important. Now we did that already up here inside the documents just to make sure that we had it. So we can just copy that to make sure that we had it. We did it right here to make sure that the document folder is correct. Okay, so up inside when we browse for the document file, we wanted to make sure that we had a document folder, right? We're checking to make sure, check for accurate document folder. I want to do the same thing inside, so I'm going to copy that to make sure that we have the document folder, because that document folder is going to where we're going to be zipping it up. So we're going to paste that in here. That's going to check for the accurate document folder. If not, letting the user browse for the correct folder. Okay, so once we know we have a correct folder, I want to set the zip folder. That's going to be a string variable. The zip folder is going to be equal to the document folder. We've got the document folder. Make sure we've set it here, admin range, document folder, right? Making sure that we've set that up properly is going to be basically our document folder plus our tax year and our tax year. That's why the tax year is so important. And I want to add a backslash onto that. Okay, so that's going to be our tax year. Okay, that's going to set the zip folder. Okay, I want to know what folder we're going to be zipping. Very important up. All the documents in that folder must be zipped up. Okay, now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to check to make sure to see if that tax document has been created. I want to make sure that we've got a correct folder there, the year. So if the directory, okay, of the document folder, and I also want to add the year onto that, and the tax year, obviously we can't zip it up if it doesn't exist, and backslash here, VB directory. I want to check to make sure there's we can do just the tax year. That's sufficient enough, right? .VB directory here is equal to empty. Then we don't have any, right? We don't have any directory. Then with the then in, then, right? We have no folder to do that. There's no year. We must have a year folder to zip up, right? There must be documents inside that year from message box. Let the user know there is no document folder for the year of what is that year, and tax year, and please add at least one document, right? Well, as soon as they add a document, the year will be created, that folder will be created. Add at least one document to zip up and email. No folder, no files, nothing to zip. Exit sub. Very good. Now what we want to do is I want to create that PDF. What I want to do in a PDF is I want to create a summary based on this. Basically, I want to print all of this starting let's say from AA, print this in a PDF, create a PDF and also include that inside the zip file. Okay, so that's just what we're going to do right now. We've already set the print. So the PDF file is going to be equal to, right? We're going to set the file path equal to this is a string variable, equal to the doc folder and the tax year and the backslash and what? And I want to set a name. I want to set a specific name for that. Tax year, that's what I want to start out with. And we'll do dash summary, right? So I want to give it a name, .pdf. That's going to give it a very specific name for that, okay? So that's going to be called, there we go. And that's called tax summary PDF. That's in a string variable so that we can create it. So once we have the accurate file path and the accurate file name, then we can create it. Okay, we just want to make sure, but if it already exists in the folder, I need to remove it if the same name exists. So if, we're going to check here, if directory, PDF file, let's make sure it's spelled out right, PDF file, .vb directory, okay, does not equal empty. Remember, that means it exists already and I need to kill it or remove it. Then kill and then a PDF file. So that's going to remove the file if it exists, because if I can't recreate a new one with the same name, remove file if existing. Continuing on, if I know that it's been cleared out now we can create it. So how are we going to do that? We can use income tax. That's the sheet associated. We've already set the print range, so that's good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to simply export it as a fixed format. And what format is? It's going to be a PDF, right? And what is that file name? Well, the file name is the PDF file. That's the file name we set. Quantity, of course, we want to set that as to 1. We don't need that. That's not necessary. And then what we want to do is include document properties, ignore print areas. We want a false. We want to include the print area, so we don't want to ignore from to. And then open after published, I want to make sure it's false. I don't want that opening up. That's sufficient for now. So that's going to create that PDF and put it in that specific file. Perfect. So that's what we have it in the right place. So once we've created that, I want to set the zip path. What is the path of that zip folder? We have the zip folder, but now I want to set the zip path so that it's going to be that actual zip file name. It's going to be equal to the doc folder and the tax year and, right, I want to give it a specific name. Dash, let's call it documents. So we have the documents.zip. That's going to give us a zip file name. Okay, good. So now we've got the zip file into a string. And now we're ready to create that. Okay, so we create that. Now we've got some Outlook applications. I've got a shell application where we're going to create that as an object in late binding, and we're going to create it right here. So we're going to set that shell app is going to be equal to, we're going to create an object, create object. And what type of object are we creating? We're going to create a shell application. This is important for creating that zip file, shell.application. application. So once we've done that, we can work with that. We need to create an empty zip file. That's the first thing. And then we fill it up. Create empty zip file. So the first thing to do with that is we're going to open that zip path. So we can do it with this. Open. First of all, I want to make sure that it's empty. So if the length of the directory here, the zip path, making sure does not equal empty, just in case it's not empty, does not equal 0, then we're going to kill it, right? Then kill, just to make sure it doesn't exist. Zip path. I want to make sure that it doesn't exist, okay? Okay, so now we're ready to open it. So if the length of the zip path is greater than 0, then kill it. Okay, once we have done that, then what I'm ready to do is open it. So we're going to open the zip path for output as number 1, okay? So it's going to open it up. Then what I want to do is I want to print number 1, okay? And this is kind of some, I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's going to take a while. I don't know, there's all these strings that help us create the zip file. Kind of weird, but making sure we get it accurate. Character 80, character 75, character 5, character 6. Somebody will explain that to me one day. Close number 1, okay? Close number 1. So basically all we're going to do is opening it, updating it, printing it out, and then closing it. Okay, so now we've created that empty zip file. Now what we want to do is we want to copy and we want to compress the folder. So copy here and compress files into the folder. Compress files into folder. Okay, so we're good to go. So to do that, again, we're going to use that shell application. So set shell app is going to be equal to create object. So we did that already. So just to make sure we've done that already. That's sufficient. We don't need that. We can just bring that down here. I'll bring it right down here. We're good to go on that. And then pasting that here. Okay, so we can create that there. Once that we've done that, we've created that cell, then what I want to do is I want to work with it. So how do we do that? So the shell app dot namespace, okay, we're going to create that namespace is the zip path. Zip path, that's the namespace of that. Dot items dot count. We need to determine how many items in that folder we're going to zip up is going to be equal to the shell app. We're going to count those. Dot namespace zip folder. So inside the namespace zip folder dot items dot count. So based on how many items are in that folder. Adding that copy here, making sure that we're copying it. We need to know where to copy it. Okay, great. So now what we need to do is we just need to make sure that we're going to automatically do that until all the files are. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a note here. Keep script waiting until compressing is done. Script waiting until compressing is done. So we can do on air resume next. Okay, and in here we're going to use a do until. Do until when? Until the shell application is the counts are equal to count, until we've done with all the things. So shell app dot namespace, and then again the zip path dot items dot count until all the items are accounted for, okay, in the zip folder. So I'm going to copy this here and I'm just going to paste it there. Do until equals. And then of course we want to make sure instead of zip path, this is going to be the zip folder, right? Until all of the items are accounted for inside the folder. There. So until all the items. So we're going to do that. I'm going to loop through all of that until that happens, okay? And then we'll do on air go to 0 just in case there's an error. All right, good. So we've got that accounted for. Good. Okay, so now we've created the application. So of course I'm going to save our work. And now we've done it. So now once the zip is created, we're ready to create our email. So we're going to email it. So we're going to set the Outlook app, again, using another object equal to create object. It's going to be the Outlook dot application. So once we've created the Outlook, now what we want to do is we want to set the Outlook email. The Outlook email, also an object, okay? And that Outlook email is going to be equal to here, that Outlook app, and then again, it's going to be dot create item. It's going to create that email, create item. That's going to create the specific email that we want to. Okay, good. Set Outlook email equal to Outlook equal. Don't forget the equal, Randy. Okay, once we have the equal there, we're ready to grow. Now we're ready to work with it. So with the Outlook email, we're going to work with that. Now we don't know who we're going to be sending it to, so we're just going to leave that blank. To equals empty, and that's going to set our email. Okay, but we also want to do attachments, right? So we want to specifically attach something. So dot attachments dot add. What do we want to add? I want to add that zip path. Zip path, that's going to be. Now we're going to set a subject. Subject, we can set any subject we want really, is going to be equal to, let's call it tax summary for, and then a space, and tax year. set subject. And now what I want to do is I want to set the body. We can do anything with that. Body is going to be equal to, I have attached the tax summary for year ending, let's do, and the tax year. Okay, keep it simple. Great. And now what we want to do is just display it. I don't want to send that email. I want to display it. Display. Use .send to send right away. So .display, that'll display it. Okay, let's take a look at that. Of course, saving our work, fixing any issues, and we'll take a look at it. This is the macro that we're going to assign here, right here. So I'm going to copy this and assign that to the button here. So this is zip an email. So holding down the control, again, assigning the macros here, assign the macro, pasting that in here and clicking OK. And now that we've got the macro assigned, we can select any year and then we'll click zip an email and take a look at that and see, let it compress. Okay, that looks really good. We've got our tax summary for year 2018. Let's double click on our zip file. We'll open that up, check for the documents inside. All the documents associated are inside that zip file. That's really, really nice. Okay, it's looking really good. All right, let's take a quick review. In this particular training, I showed you how to create a brand new list for tax years, documents associated within that tax year, save, update, add new, delete documents, and to show a preview of the document, regardless whether it's picture, PDF, Word, Excel, or anything like that, showing that preview. We also created this really cool view tax summary where we have this graph, total income, credits and income, and expenses, and also, of course, lots of conditional formatting and display that record, and of course, print it along with zip and email. Thank you very much for sticking with us on this incredibly long but amazing training. I really appreciate your continued support. Don't forget, you can support us on lots of platforms, including Patreon, where you get additional features, fixes, or focus, along with PDF downloads, advanced copies of the applications. You'll even get downloadable videos. And of course, we have our 200 workbook zip file for just $77. And now it comes with the optional PDF codebooks inside there. So I've even got that. Go ahead and check it out using the links down below. Thanks so much. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.